Ezel Latanya. When people hear this name, they think it says a lot about a person. The aristocrats whisper among themselves, and one recalls that this was the name of a girl who lived next door. The heroine realizes that the name Ezel is not famous at all. It seems that in this novel, Ezel is only a minor character. At that moment, a man approaches her. He asks if she was the one who sought the meeting, sending people for a whole month. He adds that he is not someone you meet at will. The girl smiles calmly. She replies that she knows him. He is Archduke Karl Berg Byron. The girl adds that he is not someone who can only tell dogs from cows. The young man asks what she means. The girl suggests they just sit down. She wants to take a closer look at a person you rarely see on the street. She asks his opinion. In response, he silently sits down opposite her. Ezel introduces herself. Ezel Latanya Spencer. Karl says he's never heard that name before. The girl calmly replies that she expected as much. Karl doesn't understand what she means. He asks if she is an aristocrat. Ezel says her family recently received a title. Karl understands why he has never heard of such a family. Ezel notices his thoughtfulness and asks him not to worry about it. After all, it doesn't matter what family she comes from or what her name is. The main thing is that she wanted to meet Archduke Byron, and he came. Charles says he is currently busy reorganizing the army. He expelled and arrested her messengers, but she continued to send them. So he decided to see who was so insistent on meeting him. He hopes that her request is worth a month of persecution. Ezel smiles. Karl understands that she is laughing at him without fear. Karl is straightforward and speaks little, but he looks majestic. Because of this, he has problems even with knights and the imperial family. He has broad shoulders and a handsome face, but women still avoid him. Karl says to get down to business. Ezel asks, even without tea? He replies that he has no time at all. The girl says directly she needs his help. Karl reminds her that he's too busy to even blink, but Ezel asks for the favor anyway. And she promises to pay a fair price. Karl thinks about it and asks what kind of help she needs. He is willing to listen to her first. Ezel says she is going to organize something. It will be noisy. People might mistake it for a rebellion. Karl immediately asks what she means. The girl replies that she needs him to calm the people down. Karl frowns, thinking about the punishment for rebellion, the execution of 3 generations. He asks if she understands this. Then he abruptly tells her not to even mention such a thing. He asks, is she suggesting that he lead the rebellion? Ezel realizes that he is reacting exactly as she expected. The House of Byron has served the emperor for 500 years. The men of their family are known for their unyielding nature and cruelty. Asking him to rebel is almost tantamount to death. But Ezel has thought through this conversation many times. So she calmly explains that he has misunderstood. She is not asking him to lead a rebellion. She just needs his strength to protect them from the authorities. Karl says it sounds the same to him. Ezel replies that it's completely different. She is not going to start a rebellion. You could call it saving the empire. She mentions demons and monsters returning to the edge of the world. Karl asks how she knows this. The girl says that if things continue this way, the empire will be in danger. There is currently a shortage of food and resources for the soldiers. How can they fight demons when the people are starving? According to her, the imperial palace could fall in 15 days. Karl is alarmed. Ezel asks him for help. Then she will solve the army's problem. Charles asks what she means. The girl replies that she will provide food for 500,000 soldiers. Clothes, firewood, oil, and flint for fire. Everything they need. Karl is shocked. He has been trying to solve this problem for 2 months. And she's talking about a year's worth of food. Ezel adds, it will all be free, if he helps her. Karl asks again, free? The girl calmly confirms. Karl asks if she knows the current food prices. Ezel replies that they are 10 times higher than in the summer. Karl is surprised, and she'll still give it away for free? The girl says she is simply paying him for his help. After all, he is a very busy man. Then she hands him a map of the empire. She knows how influential Archduke Byron is. During the war, he has more power than the emperor. Therefore, only he can help her. Karl looks at her intently and asks who she really is. He has never heard of her family, but she knows secrets known to few, and she sets strange conditions. He wonders, could she be hiding behind the mask of an aristocrat? Ezel just smiles. She asks, are you talking about my true face? The girl confesses that she used to live in poverty. At that time, she thought that not everything could be bought. But then she realized that was foolish. Money can buy everything, even the empire's information network, or a powerful magician, and hundreds of thousands of mercenaries. Even the most influential person in the country. Karl is struck by her words. Ezel says she has too much money and too little time. And if he doesn't agree, they still need to go to the emperor immediately. As soon as the family business began to grow little by little, a promissory note appeared out of nowhere. and by the time his father inherited the place, the situation was so complicated that it was almost impossible to fix anything. He said he would revive the family and started a new business with the last of his money, but things went wrong when his own friend betrayed him. As a result, all their savings disappeared. The young lady's mother calmly said that she would trust him anyway. Even if she tried to stop him, she would not have the strength to change anything. The young lady's father replied that this was indeed a good thing. The main character just looked at him in shock and thought that he had fallen for the same trick again. The man is surprised by his own words, while his wife just looks at him angrily. She says that it all sounds wonderful, but the problem is that he trusts people too easily. You can lose money when you can afford to, but certainly not in their current situation. She also says that if they are together, she is not afraid to eat this watery porridge for the rest of her life. But Isel needs to eat properly, and now the girl can't even eat properly and is practically starving. At this time, the young lady finishes all her porridge. Her parents look at her in complete amazement, while the girl wonders whether she should even like such food. Although, to be honest, she would be grateful just for the opportunity to eat normally. It's another matter when you have to eat such bad soup. The young lady begins to wonder what the problem is. Should she not have finished it? Even if it was thin, she still ate it, if only because then she wouldn't have to sit under such intense scrutiny. Mom says again that Isel should eat well anyway, and asks her husband if he understands her. The man replies that she shouldn't worry. After all, next month, the decision on the bankruptcy petition, signed by the imperial family, will be announced. Then they will be able to receive a certain subsidy and will stop worrying. But his wife asks if he knows how many aristocrats have fallen into an eternal sleep from hunger, thinking exactly as he does now. The man replies that, of course, he knows. Then his wife says that she still trusts him, and the main character realizes that she needs to hurry. After all, she has been reincarnated into a world where there are too many familiar names. The girl had been trying for a long time to understand where she really was, but she couldn't remember which work of fiction this world belonged to. She was about 4 years old when she finally realized that she had been reincarnated in some kind of novel. Then she began to remember familiar names and countries that she had once read about in a book. However, the problem was that she couldn't remember what novel it was, and, judging by everything, she had read too many such stories. Isel read practically every novel she could find. Therefore, it was extremely difficult to understand what kind of world she had found herself in. The girl even thought that if her family had money and power, she would be able to figure something out. For example, by meeting aristocrats with familiar names. But now she clearly understands that this is not the case at all. They are aristocrats without money or power, so she needs to remember the plot of this novel as quickly as possible. Her father left early in the morning and returned empty-handed. His slumped shoulders looked so heavy, as if the whole world were weighing on them. Today he left early again, and the young lady realizes that she must find out what events await their family. Then she can figure out a way to earn money. After all, she has no intention of living this life in poverty. This time, she will definitely get the money. The girl tries to remember what the novel was about. She loves love stories, so it's most likely that genre. Although she really hopes it's not one of those scary horror novels she's read several times. At that moment, the main character hears a knock at the door. Approaching it, she begins to wonder who could have come. Ethel realizes that no one usually comes to visit them this early in the morning, and then a worrying thought occurs to her. Could it be the creditors? Mom and Dad have just left, so maybe it's better to pretend no one is home. But the person at the door starts knocking even harder. The main character realizes that the door is about to be broken down. It seems that they will keep knocking until someone opens it. The young lady sighs and thinks that there is nothing she can do about it. She opens the door and asks who they are. A man is standing in front of her. He stares at her intently, and one of the servants tells his master that it is indeed her. The young lady immediately thinks that they might have come for money. Therefore, she needs to appear as quiet, modest, and innocent as possible. The man asks if she is Azo Latania. The girl notices that he looks quite fierce. She asks who this man is, but the man coldly tells her to answer his question first. Isel really wants to just slam the door in his face, but there is still a chance that he is a guest of her parents, so the girl answers that yes, it is her. The man takes something out of his cloak and hands it to her. Then he says that even though her family is ruined, he hopes she can still read. The young lady takes the paper and tries to understand what is written there. Meanwhile, the man is becoming increasingly annoyed. He says that it looks like he'll have to take this idiot, who can't even read, with him and teach her. According to him, it's a real disaster. The young lady wonders if he just called her an idiot. And anyway, why did he come here? This man infuriates her. Then the main character asks if he is from the Basquiel family. The man asks in surprise how she figured that out. The young lady calmly replies that it says Basquiel family right on the paper, so he is obviously a member of that family. After that, the girl asks if the man is an idiot, and the man instantly flies into a rage. He demands that she repeat what she just said, but instead, the main character asks what this document with an official seal is, which seems to be intended for her. The man replies sharply that it is not, and demands that she repeat her words. But the main character calmly asks if she should show the message to her parents. The man becomes even angrier and starts to approach the little girl, but one of the servants addresses the young gentleman. He reminds him that she is just a small child. The main character looks at the man and wonders what he is going to do. Does he really want to take his anger out on a child? The man suddenly smiles and says that he will give her one piece of advice. If we are talking about the Basquiat family's collateral line, then anyone can receive such a privilege. But it is better to refuse such an adventure. After all, if the girl accepts this offer, she will very quickly realize how pitiful her situation is. The main character wonders if he is trying to provoke her or simply wants to curse her. The man turns around and says that they are leaving. And the young lady thinks that nothing but trouble has been raining down on her since the morning. After this, people usually sprinkle salt on the threshold to drive away evil spirits. But the problem is that they are so poor that they don't even have salt in the house. So she takes some sand and sprinkles it on the threshold, wishing that the man would step in dog poop on his way out. At that moment, the girl realizes that she has another reason to earn money. That same evening, she shows the document to her parents. Her father looks at it and says that it seems the time has finally come, although the situation is not at all simple. He asks Easel if she has read what is written there. The girl replies that she has. Descendants of collateral branches can attend classes organized by the Basquiat family free of charge. The man nods and says that's exactly how it is. Descendants of collateral branches are entitled to free education, and she also has that right. The main character realizes that the Spencer family is a side branch of the Baskerville house, but she still only remembers fragments. However, one thing is certain. The Baskerville family mentioned in the novel was a ducal family that controlled the entire empire, and it turns out that their ruined aristocratic family is actually a branch of the very same Baskerville family. The realization of this is simply astonishing. The young lady asks if she has to go there. Her mother replies that no one is forcing her, but that the Basquiat family's education is known for its incredibly high standards. Her father adds that they offer first-class classes that are very difficult to find anywhere else. Then he looks at the little girl, and the main character understands what that means. All the children who attend these classes that come from families of high-ranking nobles, and she is just a descendant of a side branch who cannot even dream of such status. Her parents are probably worried that she will be humiliated and hurt there. But the girl herself is much more concerned that her father will not suffer another emotional blow. The man thinks that the classes there are very difficult. The best teachers impart knowledge at a level that is difficult to grasp. And he worries whether his daughter will be able to cope with everything on her own. Her mother approaches her and gently tells her that they are not limiting her in any way. She understands that the girl has not received the basic education that nobles usually receive. And perhaps there will be no other chance in the future, so she should take advantage of this opportunity. But what parent can tell their child outright that they might be bullied just because they come from a poor family? The main character is silent for a while, then says she will go there. Her mother asks if she has thought it through, and the girl realizes that they are talking about the Basquiat family. This is a chance to get into a residence that only a select few can enter, so the girl confidently says that everything is fine and they shouldn't worry. She herself thinks that maybe there she will be able to learn something more about this world. After a while, the young lady is standing in front of the residence, wondering why it is so huge. Up close, the estate looks even more majestic. One of the guards notices the young lady and her father. He asks what business they have there. The man replies that they have a special invitation. He hands over the document, and the guard looks at it in surprise, reading the lines about the Basquiat family's collateral branch. Then he looks from the invitation to the man and girl, and then back at the paper. He seems to be trying to understand whether they are saying that they are indeed descendants of the Basquiat family. The man notices the doubt on his face and calmly says that his surname is Spencer. The guard examines the document and wonders if it is fake. Then he says that he has never heard that surname before. The main character understands that anyone can hear a name for the first time. But why say it out loud and even treat her father, who is speaking to him politely, with such contempt? The young lady turns to the man, and the guard asks what she wants and why she is calling him. The girl wonders why he is addressing her informally and asks if this uncle is a nobleman. The man replies that he is not. Isel says that most of the people who addressed her father informally were nobles. So she decided that this gentleman was also a nobleman. The guard asks her in confusion what she is talking about. The young lady thinks that even if his clothes look modest, a nobleman is still a nobleman. And besides, he is standing in front of the descendants of the Basquiat side branch. The guard becomes visibly nervous and says that they can go inside. Then he points out where they need to go. The young lady's father realizes that even a simple guard is humiliating them. He looks at his daughter and thinks that he would probably treat her with the same contempt. And most of all, he is afraid that his daughter will be emotionally hurt. A little later, they approach one of the doors. The man says that this seems to be the right place. He realizes that the girl must go on alone. The main character looks at her father, smiles, and says that everything is fine, she will go. The man strokes her cheek and tells her to be careful. He also says that he believes in her. At that moment, another person approaches them from behind. The man notices that the guy is no fool because he did not expect to see him here at all. The main character realizes that this is the same uncle who brought the invitation. He says that the man is either too stubborn or just slow-witted and doesn't understand anything. Then he adds that it's probably both. After that, he introduces himself. His name is Gerald Baskell. He says that his son will also start attending classes this year, so he is looking forward to meeting him. The main character realizes that she is standing in front of the Baskell family's second son. Not only does he constantly throw sarcastic remarks at her, but he also only introduced himself now, which makes the girl feel very uncomfortable. The young lady's father extends his hand to Gerald and says he is pleased to meet him, preparing to introduce himself. But Gerald simply removes his hand. The father is surprised, and the man is already turning away. He says that there is very little time left before the class starts, so they'd better go inside quickly. The main character notices how this man wipes his hand. She also sees her father clench his fist, and the girl realizes that Gerald Baskell said that his son would be studying in this class. This means that they will definitely want to see what is so special about her. And she has another reason to attend these classes. The young lady enters the classroom. She is a little surprised because Gerald said that the lesson would start soon. But there is only one person in the huge auditorium. The girl even wonders if everyone is late at the same time because the size of the classroom is literally overwhelming. The lady sitting at the desk immediately stands up and greets her. The main character turns to her and wonders what is going on. The girl is visibly nervous and says her name is Lancia. The main character thinks for a moment that it is some kind of dialect. But the girl immediately becomes embarrassed and almost cries, saying that it is not. She just misspoke. The main character realizes that this is not a normal mistake, but it still sounds quite cute. The girl awkwardly says that she has ruined everything. A little later, she is sitting next to the main character and tells her that her father is from Herta, her mother is from the province of Laber, and now their family lives in Arafox. The young lady suddenly realizes where the girl's dialect comes from. She notes that it is difficult to imagine such a manner of speech in a girl dressed so elegantly, as if she were about to visit the most fashionable coffee shop in the capital. Besides, Arafox is quite far from there. The girl calmly explains that her mother is convinced that only shrewd people speak the dialect in the capital. So for a whole year, she learned to speak like a real educated city girl. But as soon as she starts to get nervous, her dialect comes out. The main character gently asks her not to cry and says that habits are not so easy to change. The girl admits that she has heard that people in the capital look down on those who speak with the dialect, considering them to be country bumpkins. The main character replies that it's not that simple. People can treat others with contempt not only because of their dialect, but also for many other reasons. The blonde asks, with interest, what exactly she means. The main character just shrugs and says that there could be many reasons. For example, poverty or low status. The blonde looks closely at the young lady and suddenly says that she looks like a doll. The main character is a little surprised and asks if she really looks like a doll. Her companion confidently replies that she does. She admits that she has never seen such sparkling red eyes in her life. And, according to her, it is incredibly beautiful. The main character sighs to herself, thinking about this dialect. Meanwhile, the girl introduces herself and says that her name is Lancia Ermunda, the second daughter of Count Ermunda. After that, she asks her companion's name. The main character replies that her name is Ezel Latanya Spencer. But at that moment, someone else approaches them and asks in surprise if they are the only two who came here. The main character looks at the guy who has appeared. Meanwhile, the blonde tries to introduce herself politely. However, the guy addresses the main character directly and asks if she is Ezel. The girl is a little surprised and asks how he knows her. The young man confidently replies that of course he knows who she is. The blonde falls silent at this moment and begins to visibly get nervous. The guy continues and says that he has heard about her. According to him, she has nothing but a loud aristocratic title. His father even warned him that there is one tactless girl who is better not to get involved with because she is not on the same level. The main character looks at him calmly. Meanwhile, the guy turns to the blonde and asks if she knew who she was getting involved with. He adds that he even finds it unpleasant to look at Ezel. She may try her best to look like an aristocrat, but in reality, she is not one at all. According to him, such an idiot is no different from the commoners who wander aimlessly through the streets. The main character suddenly asks how old he is. The young man is puzzled by the question. Ezel calmly says that she thinks he is older than her. At that moment, she remembers that he must be the son Gerald was talking about. The boy proudly replies that of course he is older, because he is already 10. But the young lady immediately asks why he is here then. She clarifies that this school teaches 8-year-olds. And what is a 10-year-old like him doing among them? So the girl asks him directly if he's stupid. The guy looks at her in shock. And the main character adds that he's only 2 years older than her. But, according to her, there isn't that much of an age difference between them anyway. Then she turns to Lancia and asks her to stand up. The girl puts Lancia next to the young man and asks him to look closely. The guy turns out to be shorter than Lancia, and the main character asks again if he is really 10 years old. The young man immediately flares up and shouts indignantly, asking what she just said and how she dares to talk like that. But the young lady calmly asks why he is angry, since she only asked a question. The guy gets even angrier and embarrassed at the same time. At that moment, Easel thinks about a simple thing. Beans grow when they are planted. Red beans grow from red beans. And the girl wonders why. Every time she meets annoying people, the words just come out. Meanwhile, the young man yells at her to apologize immediately. Other children begin to enter the room. They ask in surprise what is going on and why the guy is demanding an apology, but the young man only declares louder that she must apologize for mocking him. After that, he demands to know if she even knows who he is, and if she really doesn't recognize him. The main character thinks to herself, how could she know who he is? Although, of course, she understands whose son he is. The young man asks if she knows Raven Baxiel. The main character calmly replies that she does not. Then she turns to her friend and asks if she knows the name. The girl just shakes her head. Raven is stunned to think that the girl really doesn't know him. Has she never heard that name before? He begins to shake with indignation and asks how anyone could not know him. It seems completely unbelievable to him. The main character just wonders if all high-ranking aristocrats have a few screws loose. The young lady says, almost like a magician, that it's surprising. But it really did happen. However, the young man just yells at her to shut up and asks if she's mocking him. Therefore, she must apologize for calling him stupid and mocking his height. The main character wonders what will happen if she simply refuses. But then, she remembers that children who are being babysat often continue to throw tantrums until they get what they want. She knows this well from experience, having previously looked after her adoptive parents, twins. In the end, the young lady calmly says that it's fine and she will apologize. The guy is puzzled and asks what kind of apology that is. He demands that she bow and apologize properly. The girl just thinks about how annoying this is. Meanwhile, the young man thinks that she will finally apologize and everything will be as it should be. But then he suddenly notices that she is getting too close. The main character bends down, as if she is about to sincerely apologize. The blonde watches what is happening in shock. And then she sees the red forehead of the main character, who is looking straight at the guy. And the young man himself, whom she has just punched in the nose. Everyone around is horrified to see that the guy's nose is injured. Meanwhile, the main character touches her forehead. She wonders if she hit him too hard. Raven, with red liquid running from his nose, decides not to listen to any explanations and runs out of the classroom. The young lady remains silent and realizes that sometimes it is simply impossible to endure in silence. The blonde turns to her with concern and says that her forehead is hurt. The main character realizes that she did not plan to do that at all. At that moment, she notices the teacher entering the classroom. He immediately notices the empty seat and asks about it. After that, the man introduces himself. He says his name is Urzakiel. He also adds that he is a scientist from the Baskiel family and will now be in charge of this class. Then the man looks at the main character and thinks to himself, could she really be a servant? The young lady quietly tells her friend that it seems like the teacher is looking directly at her. The man notices that a fair-haired lady with blue eyes is sitting next to this girl. So it must be Lancia or Mundo Rogan. However, he remembers that sometimes nobles bring their servants to class out of habit. And although they are constantly warned about this in advance, such cases still happen again and again. After that, he turns to Miss Lancia and says that servants are not allowed in class. The girl looks at him in surprise. The man adds that he understands how awkward it must be for her to be in such a place alone. He demands that she immediately order her maid to leave the classroom. Hearing this, she turns to Easel in shock and wonders if the teacher is talking about her. The man adds that if she refuses to remove the maid, she will lose the right to listen to his lecture. At this moment, the main character calmly says that she is not a maid at all. The teacher asks in surprise what she just said. In response, the main character takes out a piece of paper. She shows him the document and says that the letter was addressed to her. The man takes it and looks at it in shock. Then he asks if she is really Miss Eisel. The main character just sighs wearily. Meanwhile, the teacher wonders how such a girl could possibly be called a descendant of the Baskiel family. After that, the man returns the document and says he made a mistake. He honestly admits his tactlessness and apologizes. Eisel is surprised. She expected him to simply ignore his mistake, but he calmly admitted that he had done wrong and apologized. So the young lady just smiled slightly. After a while, the teacher said that there was one last thing to explain. In this class, they would learn the basic skills necessary for every nobleman. He then shows them one of the books and says that it is their textbook. If they read it before the next class, they will be able to take the exam right away. He warns that the content is quite difficult. But for diligent students who have received a good education since childhood, reading this monumental work should not be a problem. The main character hears her classmates start to complain. She understands their reaction perfectly well. No child is happy about exams, especially when they have to read such a huge book at an age when they usually read fairy tales. Even she herself doesn't like it. The girl also wonders if the book will be given out for free. Judging by its thickness, it is clearly not cheap. But the teacher says that the book can be easily purchased at any store, therefore he urges everyone to buy this monumental work. The main character begins to wonder whether she should buy the book at all, and whether her family has enough money for such a purchase. Meanwhile, the teacher announces that today's class is over and that they will see each other next week. When the lesson ends and the main character is about to leave her desk, the teacher suddenly calls out to her. Ethel turns around and asks what's wrong. The teacher silently hands her the book and tells her to take it. The young lady looks at the book in surprise and does not understand why he is giving it to her. At that moment, the man hands her another book. He tells her to take both and follow him. Ethel is puzzled and begins to wonder what this is all about. Could it be that he looks down on her because she comes from a bankrupt noble family? And is he really going to use her as an errand girl? The blonde turns to her friend and offers to help. But the main character says that everything is fine, she doesn't need help, and she'll be back soon. As they walk away, the teacher suddenly turns around and looks at the young lady following him. Meanwhile, the main character thinks that he could walk a little slower. She feels like she is about to collapse from exhaustion. The man stops, looks at her, then takes one of her books and a scroll from her. The girl is left with only one book, and she asks what she should do with it now. The teacher calmly tells her to keep it. The girl is surprised and asks why. The man replies that he has another copy, so it's okay, but Isel still doesn't understand what that has to do with him giving her the book. The man understands that the question is quite logical. After that, he says that the book is old. He adds that he was going to throw it away anyway, so if the girl wants it, she can just take it. The main character looks closely at the book. It looks very neat and clean. It is clear that it has been opened many times, but it is still in almost perfect condition. The teacher says he no longer needs the book, so let the girl take it and do whatever she wants with it. She can throw it away or burn it. Then the girl asks if he called her over specifically to give her the book. The man looks away slightly and says, "That's not quite true." And the young lady wonders to herself why he is trying so hard to deny it. After all, he had no reason to call her with him, and it seems that he noticed how worried she was about where to get this book. Isel thanks him with a smile and says she will take good care of the book. After that, the man simply turns around and says that it's time for her to go back. The girl agrees. She realizes that this is just great. Now she has one less expense. But when the young lady opens the book, she notices the signature. It says Velin, and she feels like she has heard that name somewhere before. Suddenly, the main character remembers everything and is truly shocked. This man is an archmage, the very same supreme mage with a monocle, a true legendary wizard. He was the one who controlled the sea. His name was always associated with storms and heavy rains. Before going out to sea, sailors drank alcohol and sang songs to survive the storms that Velin once caused. It was then that the famous phrase appeared about the need to immerse one's drink in the storm caused by Velin, the archmage with a monocle. The main character begins to wonder if this man is indeed the archmage Velin. She remembers that in the novel he was in his early 40s and always wore a monocle. It seems that he became an archmage at about that age. This means that the events are taking place about 10 years before that. The main character realizes that if her memory serves her correctly, she remembers the content of the novel about the archmage Velin quite well. But suddenly, someone addresses Isel and pulls her out of her thoughts. It turns out to be a blonde lady who asks if she is in pain. She says that if Isel is feeling unwell, there is a pharmacist nearby. She can go to the counter and ask for medicine. The main character thinks, what difference does it make whether a person speaks in standard language or dialect? It sounds nice either way. She replies that she is fine, thanks Lancia for giving her a ride and helping her with the heavy book. The girl sighs with relief and says she's glad to hear it. Then the main character asks if everything is okay with Lancia herself. The blonde is surprised and asks what she means. Isel replies that she heard everything. Lancia understands what she is talking about and says that she doesn't care about such things at all. But the main character still mentions that her family has gone bankrupt. The girl calmly replies that even so, Isel is still an aristocrat. Moreover, according to her, Isel looks even more aristocratic than she does, and she doesn't speak in a dialect. The main character just smiles. After a while, she gets out of the carriage and thanks the girl for giving her a ride today. She also tells Lancia that she shouldn't worry so much about her dialect. After all, it doesn't sound strange at all. The blonde is about to say something, but the main character gently stops her and asks her to just be more confident. She says that there is nothing wrong with her dialect. And even if it slips out sometimes, it's not the end of the world. And if Lancia is still worried about it, she can simply learn to control her speech gradually. Isel promises that he will definitely help her with this. The blonde is almost in tears at these words. And the main character realizes that Lancia will need time to become the aristocrat that people want her to be. Meanwhile, two men are sitting at a table. One of them says that he heard some rather interesting news today. This man is the blind priest Wahidman Paddleton Baskil. Gerald calmly asks what the news is. His interlocutor replies that the story is quite curious. It turns out that his grandson, who was attending class today, left the classroom. The reason was a red liquid that was flowing from his nose. The young man immediately tensed up upon hearing this and prepared to justify himself to his father. But his grandfather simply said that he had always respected his son's educational policy and had waited patiently for 2 years. He even gave his own advice to his unfortunate grandson. However, this proved to be insufficient. The boy did not last even a single day and simply ran away. After that, the old man asks Gerald what he thinks about it. The boy's father replies that Raven is still young and has simply seen so much red liquid for the first time. But the man sharply replied that he wasn't asking Gerald. The boy has a mouth, so he is capable of answering for himself. The young man becomes even more frightened. Then the old man asks if he really disobeyed orders just because of the red liquid coming from his nose. Or was there something else? He adds that he heard something interesting. They say that his grandson was beaten up by some pathetic girl, and he asks if it's true. Gerald immediately turns to his father, but the old man coldly pronounces his name. After that, the guy immediately falls silent and looks at his brother. The latter just smirks, which angers Gerald even more. And Wahidman calmly says that it all looks quite funny. He notes that a descendant of the Basquiel family's collateral line dared to touch the direct heir. But even so, he cannot turn a blind eye to the fact that the young man left the class without permission. The young man immediately apologizes. However, the man only orders the girl to be brought to him. Gerald is visibly surprised. Meanwhile, his brother calmly finishes eating, gets up from the table, and turns to Gerald. He says that he did well today. Meanwhile, Raven is shaking with fear and almost starts to cry. But her father looks at her with contempt and calls her pathetic. With tears in her eyes, the young woman asks him again to forgive her. At this moment, the main character is thinking about something strange. No matter how much she recalls the novel that mentioned the Archmage Velen, it was clearly far from the romance genre. And it was romance that she always liked the most. That's why she rarely read other genres. But then the girl thinks again about the Basquiel family and the Archmage. She has a vague feeling that she knows which work this world comes from. However, the details escape her. Only despair and destruction come to mind. The young lady sighs heavily and begins to understand something terrible. This world will one day perish. She doesn't remember the exact plot. But she still knows the general outline of the original story. It is a typical fantasy story. In it, a distant evil gradually spreads and destroys the world. The people who try to stop it become heroes and ultimately triumph. But now the pages of that story have become her reality. Evil is already approaching, and the world is on the brink of destruction. In other words, she too may fall into an eternal sleep. The girl realizes that she once thought she had been reborn as a noblewoman and would be able to enjoy life with a silver spoon in her mouth. But her family went bankrupt, and their gold turned to dust, and now it turns out that she may also fall into an eternal sleep while still young, because the world is going to be destroyed. The young lady begins to think that perhaps she has misunderstood everything. Could this world really be coming to an end? Even though she had to endure hardship every day because of poverty, the world itself seemed calm and peaceful. War felt like something distant and almost unreal. It was hard to imagine that monsters could roam the capital. Therefore, the girl cannot believe that such a world could really be destroyed. Soon, she approached a familiar old man. He immediately asked her what she had come for again. The girl greets him politely. The old man sighs and asks if she has come to borrow a book again. After all, this is a bookstore, not a library. He grumbles and asks how many times he has to repeat himself before she finally understands. But the main character just smiles. Then the man tells her to return the books before the store closes. The girl continues to smile. The old man asks again if she is going to take the book. But she shakes her head and says that she did not come for that today. The man is surprised and asks why she came then. He says he's not looking for a playmate. The girl replies that a friend could indeed brighten up her boring days, but today she came with one question. The young lady points to the newspaper and asks about it. The man is surprised and wonders what is wrong with the newspaper. Then she asks if it is true that there is only one major newspaper publisher in the capital. The old man replies that there are actually 3 publishers in the capital that print morning newspapers, but only one of them is capable of producing evening newspapers as well. He then asks why she is interested in this. The young lady asks if there is a newspaper that has recently started printing morning news. The man replies that if she looks hard enough, she might find such a publisher. But then he suddenly wonders why he is answering the little girl's questions so seriously. After all, an 8-year-old child is unlikely to understand the difference between morning and evening newspapers. So he asks her directly why she needs all this. The girl replies that she was just curious. She wanted to know if there was a recently opened publishing house called Knox. The man says that if she is interested in Knox, which has recently opened, it is located over there. But then he asks how she found out about it in the first place. He even wonders if her father is trying to get a job there. Or maybe she herself is going to try her luck. In response, the young lady just smiles. After that, she bows and leaves. On her way home, the girl realizes one important thing. It was this publishing house that first reported the approaching end of the world. Despite pressure from the nobility who tried to silence the press in order to hide their secrets and escape, it was Knox that continued to print newspapers and report on what was happening. Their publication caused enormous chaos in the capital, and soon a real uprising broke out. Now the girl understands that Knox Publishing really exists, so she hasn't mixed anything up. And now she wonders, should Knox's existence make her happy, or, on the contrary, scare her? If she looks at everything optimistically, she has one huge advantage. She knows the future that is about to happen. Of course, she cannot say for sure what will happen tomorrow, but she still knows the main events of history. This means she has a chance to make money. Perhaps she will finally be able to escape poverty. But if you look at the situation from another angle, there is one unpleasant fact. The world is on the brink of destruction. Whether she likes it or not, one day everything will perish. And with it, she herself may sink into eternal sleep. In essence, it's like a death sentence. But something else worries her much more. Unlike the general story, she cannot remember the names of the main characters at all. She begins to wonder how anyone could possibly remember the name of the main character in a book they read several years ago. Even when she tries to strain her memory, her doubts only grow stronger. Besides, the main characters are probably still just children now. The young lady looks down at her hands. But then she realizes that now is not the time to fill her head with such thoughts. It's time to put her knowledge to good use. A little while later, the girl is sitting next to her parents. She thinks about how to tell them about everything. She understands that 8-year-old children are capable of many things. But if she does something rash now, she will have to deal with the consequences herself in the future. The girl begins to doubt whether her parents will believe her if she tells them everything, and then she realizes that, of course, they won't believe her. Even if she told the truth, they would just ignore it. But she still needs to hint at it somehow. At that moment, her mother turns to her and asks if everything is okay with Azael. The girl replies that everything is fine, but her mother notices that she looks too serious. The main character asks if this is true. Then she looks at her father and wonders if something bad has happened. The man asks if she is sure about this. The girl replies that nothing has happened. Then the blonde man turns to Azael and asks if she is having any problems in class. Later, when everyone is asleep, there is a loud knock on the door. The man goes downstairs and thinks to himself, annoyed, who could be coming at this hour of the night? He thinks it is extremely rude to knock on the door like that and asks who it is. The man at the door asks if he is the father of Azael Latanya Spencer. The father replies that his name is Beoric and asks who he is. Then he notices the stranger's sword, so he is a knight. And Beoric wonders what a knight is doing here at such a late hour. The man says that the young lady's father needs to meet someone tomorrow. He then hands him a letter. Beowulf immediately notices the Bascal family crest on it. He asks who exactly sent him. The knight replies that this person values punctuality very much, so they had better not be late. Then the father asks why they are looking for him and Azael. But the knight says that they will find out the details tomorrow when they meet the right person. However, Beoric cannot hold back and loudly demands an explanation. He asks why the hell they came in the middle of the night and demanded a meeting without explaining anything. He adds that they should at least have said who sent them and why. Is this how the knights of the Baskerville family behave now? The knight remains silent for a moment, then slowly removes his hood. He introduces himself and says that he is Baron Bramberg. He is also a knight in the personal guard of His Excellency Duke Wahidman Basquiel. The blonde man is visibly surprised. Before him stands the Duke's personal knight. Meanwhile, the knight explains that it is the Duke himself who wishes to meet Miss Azael Latanya. He adds that because of the girl's young age, the Duke asks her father to accompany her. Beoric immediately asks why such a person suddenly needs his daughter. The knight replies that the details will be revealed tomorrow. All they need to do is show the letter at the entrance, and they will be escorted inside. After that, he reminds them again not to be late. Then he says that this is all he had to say. He asks to be excused, wishes everyone a good night, and leaves. The next day, the young lady's mother asks her husband what happened during the night and who made him scream so loudly. In response, he simply shows her the letter. The main character observes what is happening and senses a strange, tense atmosphere. Her father looks at Azael and asks if it has anything to do with her. The girl does not understand and asks what he is talking about. Then the man hands her the letter. The girl sees the Basquiel family crest on it. Her father immediately asks what happened. The young lady tries to say something, somewhat confused. But her father asks her to tell the truth and explain what happened. After all, Duke Wahidman himself wants to see her. The girl wonders if this is really serious. Did that idiot really complain to his grandfather, and now the Duke wants to meet her? She begins to imagine how the Duke intervenes in a normal childhood fight, and how he asks how she dared to do such a thing to his grandson. So now it seems impossible to her. But her father addresses her again. The main character decides to tell the truth. She realizes that she will never be able to have a good relationship with this jerk anyway. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Someone loudly demands that the servant immediately get out of the way. He asks if the servant did not hear the order. The servant replies to the young master that he cannot leave right now. But the young man says that he has a headache and needs rest. The servant asks anxiously if it hurts a lot. He says he will bring medicine, but the young man still cannot leave the room. The young man shouts indignantly and asks if they are prepared to take responsibility if he collapses due to feeling unwell. He adds that he will take care of his studies himself later. He asks who they are to tell him what to do. He demands again that they get out of his way. According to him, if he stays in the room for another second, he will simply go crazy. At that moment, his father approaches him and calmly says his name. The young man is immediately frightened. Gerald coldly says that he couldn't even last one day as he was told, and asks if the boy has already forgotten his words. The young man repeats the rule. Until the sun rises, or his father says it is enough, he must remain in this room. The man replies that he did not give permission, and the sun has not even appeared on the horizon yet. The boy immediately begins to apologize. He says that he has a severe headache, so he wanted to rest a little. But the man just replies coldly that this is just another excuse. He adds that he seems to have overestimated the boy. The young man desperately says that this is not the case. He promises that next time he will definitely try his best. But his father responds sharply that he is fed up with his promises about next time. He thinks it is not even worth mentioning how much shame and humiliation he has suffered because of these words. The young man panics and says that this is not the case. He apologizes again and assures him that he will definitely succeed. He starts to talk about next time, but suddenly stops. Then he promises that he will go back to his room right now and study hard. And he begs him to forgive him. But his father only thinks what a pitiful sight it is. At that moment, one of the servants approaches Gerald. The boy turns to his father again. The man suddenly asks if it is true that the girl's name is Isel Litania, and if she is the Miss Spencer he has heard about for the first time. The young man is surprised and does not understand the question. He begins to wonder why his father suddenly remembered that girl. The man silently throws him a book and says that this girl has just arrived here with her father to meet with the head of the family. The young man asks in shock if she is really going to meet his grandfather. His father calmly replies that he has heard about the upcoming exam, and he hopes that this time Raven won't disappoint him. After saying this, the man leaves, and the boy, his hands trembling, says that he will definitely live up to his expectations. Meanwhile, the maid turns to Isel and her father and asks them to wait a moment. The man sighs heavily. He understands that because his daughter has harmed the Duke's precious grandson, she will most likely be punished. However, remembering the unpleasant words that the boy had said to Isel, the father still hopes that there is no cause for serious concern. But he still wonders whether Wahidman Basquiat is capable of showing mercy. After all, the Duke could even expel Ezel from class. Thinking about his daughter's peace of mind, he sometimes thought that she shouldn't have gone to school at all, but since she wanted to go herself, he couldn't refuse her. Now the man thinks that if necessary, he will beg for forgiveness, even on his knees. After all, he is responsible for his daughter's actions. That is probably why they were called here. Meanwhile, the young lady calmly tells her father that the cookies here are very tasty. She smiles and hands one cookie to her father. The man smiles back involuntarily. The girl asks if everything is okay, and says that she thinks she is eating too much. But the man replies that she should eat as much as she wants. Ethel remembers that the Spencer family used to be able to afford any sweets they wanted. Back then, she could eat as many as she wanted too. Now the man just sighs quietly, and the main character begins to think about what she should do. Outwardly, she appears calm. But inside, her thoughts are racing, trying to figure out what to say. When adults intervene in a children's fight, it already looks pretty mean. And here we are talking about the Duke of Basquiat himself. But in a society where status decides everything, it is difficult to do anything about it. At that moment, a maid approaches them and says that they have been waiting a long time. She then informs them that His Highness is ready to receive them. The man asks where they should go, and the maid replies that the Duke is waiting in his office and that she will show them in. The man takes his daughter by the hand and says it's time to go. The maid approaches the guard and explains the situation. He replies that his lordship is inside and they may enter. The young lady is surprised and wonders if they really can just walk in like that. They go inside, and the girl sees the Duke. He calmly tells them to come closer. The young lady's father swallows hard. He understands perfectly well that he is standing before Duke Wahidman Basquiat himself. The Duke notices how nervous the man is and tells them not to look as if they have been brought to their execution. He asks them to come closer and assures them that nothing terrible will happen. The father calms down a little and cautiously approaches. As they approach, the young lady notices some bags nearby. She begins to wonder what they are. Perhaps it is food. Then she looks at the Duke. Suddenly, she notices that he is looking directly at her. She thinks he looks quite angry. Or maybe it's just her imagination. The girl thinks that perhaps it's because she was the reason his beloved grandson skipped school. Meanwhile, the man says that Raven looked at him and even cried. The young lady is surprised and asks what he is talking about. The Duke replies that Raven is tired of riding. The girl still doesn't understand what he's getting at. Then the man suddenly asks if she is afraid of him. The young lady honestly replies that, of course, she is afraid. And she thinks to herself, is there anyone who would not be afraid of someone who could get rid of them in an instant? But the Duke looks at her closely and realizes one thing. There is not a trace of fear in her eyes. Usually, even adults freeze when they see him. Just look at her father. Unlike his daughter, he is clearly anxious. That is why the Duke notices that despite her fear, the girl is not crying or trying to run away. Then the young lady asks if he will let them go home if she cries. The man thinks what a cheeky girl she is. But no matter how reckless his grandson may be, the fact remains. He was beaten up after all. And so he became curious to see this child. Now he looks closely at the little girl. Then he asks if she knows the origin of the Spencer surname. The girl replies that she does not. The man then explains that many consider the Spencers to be a branch of their family. The surname appeared after a woman from the Baskerville family ran away and gave birth to a child out of wedlock. In other words, their relationship is so distant that their common ancestor is almost forgotten. The young lady wonders if this means that he is some kind of distant relative. The Duke continues and says that she has harmed his grandson, who is a direct descendant of the Baskerville family. He asks what she herself thinks about this, and whether he should show leniency toward her. The girl's father, in shock, immediately says that if someone needs to be punished, then let him be punished. But the Duke calmly replies that he is not to blame for what happened, so why does he want to accept punishment? Regardless of age, a person must learn to take responsibility for their actions. And doesn't he himself know how boundless a parent's love for their children can be? The man replies that this is not the case, and reminds him that Isel is still very young. But the Duke says that youth does not mean that she can get away with everything. Then he asks the girl herself what punishment she thinks is fair. The girl realizes that her grandfather has really decided to stand up for his grandson. And the man who is considered one of the most powerful in the empire suddenly turns out to be quite petty. Then she asks if punishment is really necessary. The man asks if there is a reason why she cannot accept it. The young lady replies that there is a reason, but she doubts that the Duke will consider it sufficient. Hearing this, her father looks at her in shock. The man thinks he has lived a long life and seen a lot, but this child... She looks him straight in the eye and does not look away. Then he calmly says that if she does not speak, punishment will follow anyway. The girl's father is even more surprised. The Duke adds that, from what he has heard, his grandson has also behaved badly. He is not particularly gentle or patient, but since the girl does not want to give the reason why she cannot accept the punishment, then she will receive the same punishment as Raven. The young lady immediately asks what the punishment is. The Duke replies that she must write a letter of repentance. 2 pages will suffice, and she must bring it with her at their next meeting. The young lady's father asks in surprise whether the Duke is really talking about a letter of repentance. The Duke remarks that, in his opinion, 2 pages are quite enough for an 8-year-old child. After that, he asks with a slight sneer if the father really expected him to order the girl's leg to be cut off. The young lady's father is immediately frightened. The Duke turns his gaze to the girl and asks if she is still afraid of him. She replies that she is a little afraid. Hearing this, the Duke laughs and says that it is difficult to find a person who would not be afraid of something like that. But at the same time, she was brave enough to hit a representative of the Baskerville family. He explains that he simply wanted to see how brave the child was, who had made his grandson bleed from the nose during the very first lesson. The young lady suddenly thinks that all this seems familiar to her. And suddenly, she realizes that this man fell into an eternal sleep because of an accident, and this happened even before the main story began. Then the girl realizes that those bags most likely contain exactly what she thinks they do. The young lady carefully opens one of the bags. Her father asks in shock what she is doing. The girl calmly says she wants to ask a question, but her father apologizes to the Duke in alarm and tries to stop Isel, saying she mustn't behave like that. But the Duke simply tells her to ask her question. The girl sniffs one of the flasks. Then she asks if it is gunpowder. The man replies that it is. Then he asks, in surprise, how she knows about gunpowder. The girl explains that she read about it in a book. She adds that it has a rather strong smell. The Duke asks again if she is talking about the smell. He realizes that the flasks are sealed very tightly, and there should be no smell coming from them. But the girl says she can still smell it, and according to her, it smells like sweet sugar. The man takes one of the flasks and sniffs it. Then he says he doesn't even know what to say. The girl remarks again that if it's gunpowder, why does it smell sweet? The young lady's father tries to stop Isel again and says it's time for them to leave. But the girl looks at the Duke and realizes one thing. Wahidman Padilton Baskerville is a character who falls into an eternal sleep before the main story begins. The reason is that he finds himself right in the center of an explosion. The gunpowder was brought in for the development of the Baskerville family's military affairs. But to save money, they used a large amount of cheap sugar instead of the necessary materials, such as vinegar or sulfur. Because of this, the gunpowder became extremely unstable during storage. As a result, a sudden explosion occurred, which led to the Duke's eternal sleep. After that, serious discord began within the Basquiat family, and this was one of the reasons why the Empire was ill-prepared for war. Now the young lady thinks that the Duke has probably already understood the hint, and now he will be able to figure it out for himself. The main thing is that he does not ignore the words spoken by the child. After a while, the main character is already sitting in class. The blonde lady immediately asks how everything went and if there were any problems. The main character notices that the girl still speaks in dialect, and she finds it quite cute. The blonde immediately worries and asks if she used her dialect again. Iselle says that she can speak however she wants around her. Then Lancia asks how the meeting went and what the Duke said. The main character pretends not to understand what she is talking about. Lancia is a little nervous, but reminds her that she did meet with Duke Basquiat. Iselle is surprised and asks how she found out about it. The girl explains that she told her father everything, and he, in turn, informed the Duke. Her father is very close to the Duke, so if he ever summons Iselle, she was asked to report it immediately. The young lady replies that now everything is clear, and that is why she was punished with only a 2-page letter of repentance. The blonde begins to worry and asks if she did something wrong. Maybe that made the Duke even angrier. The main character thinks that this girl turned out to be much better than she had expected. After all, they had only met once. But after hearing about her problem, she took the risk anyway. So the main character smiles and says that thanks to her, the Duke wasn't too angry. And she thanks her friend. The blonde sighs with relief and says, "Thank God." She was worried that she had done something stupid again. Iselle realizes that Lancia is a person who cares deeply about others. By the way, today is exam day, and she wonders if she will be able to remember anything after so many years. It reminds her of the days when she studied hard to get into university and get a scholarship. Iselle asks Lancia if she has prepared and read the book. The girl replies that she has not. She was only able to read about 10 pages. She admits that the text is very difficult and contains many unfamiliar words. The main character is surprised. Does this book really seem that difficult? Yes, it is a memoir, and there are many unfamiliar words, but it is still possible to read it in a week. At that moment, the teacher enters the classroom and tells everyone to get ready for the exam. After that, he hands out a sheet with assignments to everyone. The main character looks at the questions, and she realizes that it's all incredibly simple. Even as an 8-year-old child, she thinks she takes her studies too seriously. She also realizes that most students would hardly be able to read such a thick book. After a while, she finishes all her assignments. Looking up, she notices that the teacher is looking directly at her. She wonders if he has been watching her all this time. The man approaches her, looks at the test, and says that if she has already finished, she can leave. He adds that there is a man waiting for her outside the door, so she needs to go out and follow him. The girl realizes that if she goes out now, all eyes will immediately be on her. The other children will surely wonder how she was able to solve everything so quickly. And the girl thinks again how difficult it is to live quietly and unnoticed. She goes out into the hallway. Suddenly, a maid approaches her and asks if the lady has finished her exam. She asks Iselle to follow her. The main character is surprised and wonders where the stranger is taking her, but she decides to follow her anyway. After a while, they arrive at their destination. There she sees the Duke. The man says that they have arrived. Then he turns to the servants and orders them to begin. At that moment, there is a powerful explosion. The ground beneath her feet begins to shake and the girl falls to the ground. She is stunned, wondering what just happened. When the smoke begins to clear, she notices a transparent wall next to her. But she still can't get over the question of why the explosion happened. The Duke looks at the girl and asks if she is frightened. But Iselle cannot understand how he can smile at all. After all, she thought her heart was about to stop. The man says that no matter how stress-resistant she is, she still got scared. At that moment, the young lady wonders if he really detonated the bomb just to test her endurance. The girl admits that she was a little scared and cautiously asks if he plans to do something like this again in the future. The man calmly asks if he should do it again. After that, he sighs quietly and notes to himself that this girl is indeed a very unusual person. But be that as it may, she is still a child, so he asks her if she has ever seen combustible substances explode. The young lady honestly replies that she never has. Then the Duke asks what she thinks the explosion that just happened looked like, and whether it seemed powerful to her. While the girl tries to understand what exactly happened, the man recalls their previous conversation. At that time, she said that she was bothered by a sweet smell. They decided to check everything and found out that the cause was cheap sugar. Someone dared to deceive him and replace the gunpowder with a cheaper one to lower the price. The Duke also learned that this particular gunpowder had caused several accidents in which people had been seriously injured. Iselle realizes that everything happened exactly as she had suspected, and recalls that Vahidman also fell into an eternal sleep in that unfortunate accident. The man asks how she found out about it. The girl replies that she is not sure and just noticed a sweet smell. But the man clarifies that this is not what he asked. He explains that he was interested in something else. How does she even know that gunpowder smells sweet? After all, normal children would never guess that such a scent is abnormal for him. However, she talks about it as if the sweet smell is a clear problem. So he asks her again how she knows this. The main character is momentarily lost and doesn't know how to respond. Judging by his expression, ridiculous excuses definitely won't work now. She realizes that he won't believe her anyway, even if she tells the truth. So she simply says she doesn't know. The man asks incredulously if this is really true. Then the young lady explains that she once read a book. The book said that the main ingredients of gunpowder are salt, vinegar, and sulfur. None of these ingredients have a sweet smell, so she decided that something was strange here. In her mind, she almost begs him to at least take her word for it. But the man just smiles calmly. He says that even people who have worked in this field for decades have not noticed anything. But an 8-year-old child, just by reading a book, immediately realized that something was wrong. He adds that moments like these are what make life worth living. The young lady wonders if he realizes that they are trying to deceive him, because even she finds it hard to believe that this sounds like a plausible explanation. The man then asks if she did well on her exam. The girl replies that everything went fine. The Duke says that he does not like to talk much. He much prefers to prove everything with deeds. Last time, the girl was punished for the harm she caused to the Basquiat family, but this time she helped him, and it would be wrong to leave it unrewarded. Isel says that everything is fine and nothing is needed. However, the man informs her that he happens to have a position available for a secretary. He explains that the young lady's father will be working under him. He is quite knowledgeable about business, and with a little training, he could be very useful. The girl is amazed, wondering if her father will really become the secretary to the Duke of Wahidman himself. The man adds that by looking at a child, one can often understand what their parents are like. Therefore, her father's appointment to this position is largely thanks to her. After saying this, he hands the young lady a piece of paper and says that he has another invitation for their family. This invitation is for a banquet in honor of his birthday, which will take place next week, and he emphasizes that this is his personal wish. Therefore, he hopes that they will definitely come. The girl is a little surprised and wonders if everything really went so well. Meanwhile, Raven's father is in his room. He crumples up the paper and throws it away in annoyance, saying how pathetic this guy is, because he is very disappointed in him. He couldn't even pass the first exam. Then the man coldly asks if the boy really wants to say that he is incapable of anything. The boy immediately replies that this is not the case. Then the man reminds him that from an early age, he received an education that others could only dream of. But even with such an advantage, he cannot surpass a girl from a family of bankrupt aristocrats. After these words, he asks if the boy still has any excuses. The man says that he himself spent 2 years to rise up. Then he hands the ball to one of the servants and orders him to break it, and the servant immediately agrees. Seeing this, the boy begs in horror for him to stop. He says he will try even harder and begs him not to do it. But the man just turns away and coldly says that disappointment must be paid for. The young man repeats that he was wrong and asks for forgiveness. He even says that it would be better to beat him and lock him in a room than to break his sword. Sometime later, the main character and her friend find themselves at a banquet. The blonde looks around in admiration and says that this is her first time. The main character asks in surprise what she is talking about. Lancia explains that this is her first banquet, which she attended with her friend. As soon as she opens her mouth, her dialect is immediately noticeable, so she used to remain silent, afraid that she would not look like a real aristocrat. As a result, she had no choice but to stand somewhere in the corner, and when her parents said that the banquet was over and it was time to leave, she just followed them silently. Now she says that she considers it a great stroke of luck to be here with Isel. At this moment, the main character wonders how many dialects she actually speaks. The blonde turns to her and says that Isel looks simply beautiful today. She adds that she looks like a real fairy. The main character is a little embarrassed by this comparison. The blonde continues and says that, in her opinion, this is exactly what forest fairies should look like. But the young lady replies that this role would suit Lancia herself much better. However, the blonde immediately objects. She says that she has the most ordinary hair color, ordinary eyes, and even her manner of speaking is strange. Isel realizes that there is some truth in her words. In the Empire, about 80% of people are blonde, so Lancia's hair color really doesn't stand out. But she herself grew up among people with thick black hair. That's why Lancia's shining golden curls seem incredibly beautiful to her, and she tells her friend that she doesn't look ordinary at all. On the contrary, she is much brighter and more dazzling than many people, and if there are fairies somewhere, they surely look just like her. Hearing this, the blonde hugs her friend tightly and joyfully says that she simply adores her. At that moment, someone addresses Lancia. The main character greets His Excellency and introduces herself as the eldest daughter of the Isel Spencer family. The man replies that he is pleased to meet her. Then he apologizes for immediately shifting the responsibility for Lancia onto her when they first met. He explains that he only recently arrived in the capital and had no time to look after his daughter. The main character realizes that she is standing before Count Zakal Ermundo. She replies that everything is fine and he should not worry, because she really enjoys spending time with Lancia. The man thanks her for her words and remarks that he heard she was unable to attend the banquet with her parents. The girl replies that it just happened that way. The young lady understands that Wahidman's invitation was addressed to the entire Spencer family, and she could have come with her parents. But Lily, who had been feeling unwell lately, came down with a fever. Therefore, her father had to skip the reception and stay home to care for the sick Lily. Lancia's father understands that Azel is trying to smile, but he is sure that she and her parents are very upset right now. Therefore, he says that if she suddenly needs help, she can feel free to turn to him. He also adds that the girl can just call him by his name. After that, the man gently kisses his daughter and says that it's time for him to go. The main character silently watches this scene. A little later, Lancia says that the prince is coming to the banquet today. It is his first time at such an event, so all attention is focused on his visit. The main character calmly replies that she is not interested at all. The girl is surprised and asks why, because isn't she curious to see the prince? Azel only thinks about how she can be interested in a person whose face she has never even seen. Then she asks Lancia if she dreams of marrying a prince. The blonde immediately replies that of course she does, because he must be very handsome. To this, the main character remarks that they may well end up with a fat and completely unattractive boy. But the blonde confidently says that this simply cannot be. In fairy tales, all princes are always handsome, so this one will definitely be the same. The young lady just thinks about it. She wonders if ordinary 8-year-old children really think that way. Then she asks if Lancia will understand when she gets older that princes on white horses don't really exist. The blonde asks in confusion what she is talking about, since they are both the same age. And the main character just wonders what she could possibly understand. After a while, quiet whispers begin to spread through the hall. Someone asks what is going on. People look at one guy and say that he has been standing there for some time. Rumors have long been circulating in the hall that Raven, the grandson of Duke Wahidman, is considered an oddball. The young gentleman from a scholarly family dreamed of becoming a knight, but he was unable to enter the academy, even with the Basquiat family name behind him. He still had to accept that wherever he went, people would call him the weak link in the Baskerville family. One of the guests quietly asks what happened this time. It seems that Sir Gerald reprimanded him again. At that moment, the young man clenched his fist tightly. He had lost his sword, and every day he was locked in his room for 10 hours so that he would not be distracted from his studies. He is only allowed to eat and even sleep when his father permits it. And now the boy wonders why all this is happening. Because of that girl. If it weren't for her, he wouldn't have to put up with such treatment. He is angry and doesn't understand why he is constantly being compared to her and what is so special about her. The young man decides that when they meet again, he will definitely take revenge on her. The main character quietly clicks her tongue and wonders what the hell this guy is doing here. Besides, Lancia has gone to get some sweets. Azel notices how the Basquiat family members walk around the hall, greet guests and make acquaintances, while the young gentleman stands in the corner with a gloomy face. They say that position adorns a person. But when a person occupies a high position and does nothing, it looks rather pitiful. The main character continues to watch him and suddenly notices that there is another person standing next to the guy. He is clearly mocking the boy. Azel thinks that even here, this man does not change his unpleasant character. She even feels a little sorry for the child. But then she notices the knife in the brunet's hands. She immediately thinks about what he is going to do. The girl instantly jumps up from her seat. She understands that even though they are still children, such things are no laughing matter. So she immediately rushes towards them. In a moment, she is already there. And at that moment, she sees the brunette swing a knife at the young man. The girl immediately stands in front of him, shielding him with her body. At that moment, Prince Ishmael arrives at the estate. Raven's father greets him and says that it seems they have not seen each other since last year, when they met at a banquet in honor of His Majesty's birthday. He also adds that he regrets not being able to meet him earlier. The prince calmly replies that everything is fine. People in the hall begin to whisper and discuss what is happening. Some believe that this is too great an honor, because even though the young man is of imperial blood, he is only the 5th prince. This means he is not destined to take the throne. Therefore, the representative of the Basquiat family could have refrained from bowing his head to him. Moreover, his position has become rather shaky lately. The prince understands that the choice of Wahidman's successor is imminent, and Raven's mere appearance is enough for him to be forgotten. In such a situation, he has to maintain ties with the imperial family. Meanwhile, the man says that the prince has matured noticeably over the past year, and that the emperor is surely proud of him. The blonde man thanks him and says he is glad to hear such words from a young nobleman. But he adds that the latter does not need to be so polite. However, Gerald replies that it is natural for a servant who enjoys the favor of the imperial family to show respect. Moreover, Prince Gladiolus's older brother and the concubine are considered important pillars of the empire. Therefore, it is only natural to bow his head before him. The butler understands that ultimately, this is about the concubine and the first prince, Gladio, who support the 5th prince. Then the butler turns to his master. The young man says that they can stop talking about him and asks how his son Raven is doing. He mentions that he heard about the guy failing his academy exam and expresses hope that he will have better luck next time. The man is momentarily confused and wonders if he has not heard the latest news. He replies that, unfortunately, he does not intend to support his son. Raven himself said that he wants to stop studying and take up the family business. The prince asks in surprise if this is true, because if so, it is very sad. He adds that there is still time, so why not give his son another chance? The man inside begins to get angry, but still keeps smiling. Then the prince apologizes. He says that perhaps he shouldn't have said such things and asks for forgiveness for this minor oversight. He explains that it is due to his age. Gerald replies that everything is fine. The prince adds that if time permits, it will be at the end of the banquet. At that moment, the butler addresses the prince. Gerald is seething with anger inside and thinks to himself, "How dare this boy be so rude to him?" Meanwhile, the butler announces that there seems to be a problem. The prince asks what it is. But when he turns around, he is shocked to realize that the child has disappeared. Gerald asks where the prince is going. But the boy is already leaving him alone. The brunette is very angry and wonders how the fifth prince could treat him this way. Meanwhile, the prince is running fast and asking himself where the guy is. He remembers saying that he would go alone. Now he just hopes that nothing bad has happened. The young man throws open one of the doors and freezes in shock when he sees what is happening inside. There he sees the same boy, who is tearfully addressing Ishmael. His Highness asks in confusion, "What is going on?" At that moment, Raven screams loudly, demanding that she hand over the boy immediately. Despite the wound on her arm, the main character calmly replies that this will not work and that he had better stop right now. At this moment, Ismail is surprised by the girl in front of him, because even in such a situation she remains surprisingly calm. Raven asks irritably who she thinks she is, daring to give him orders. The main character simply replies that it's all becoming too dangerous. The young man becomes even angrier and asks if she knows what happened to him because of her. Now he has to sit locked up for 10 hours every day, and he has lost his sword, which he valued more than anything else in the world. He asks again if she understands this. Isel calmly replies that she doesn't understand why he keeps asking about it. After all, it's his own fault, and she didn't do anything. Didn't force him to study, and certainly didn't throw away his sword. But the young man immediately yells at her to shut up. According to him, it was all her fault. He claims that the guy pushed him first, even though he was just walking by. The young lady calmly says that from what she saw, he simply lost his temper. Raven immediately shouts that this is a lie, and that she is making it all up. Isel thinks that everything that is happening is complete nonsense and has no idea what to do now. At that moment, the guy addresses her again. He tells her to give him the boy. If she does, he will simply let her go. The young lady then asks what will happen if she doesn't. Raven replies that then she will have the same scar on her face as on her arm. Isel realizes that the guy has completely lost his mind and the situation is becoming increasingly dangerous, so she firmly says that this will not happen. Raven asks irritably who she is, why she keeps interfering, and whether they know each other. Isel realizes that they definitely don't know each other, and wonders for a moment if it wouldn't be better to just leave. But she looks at the boy who is crying and feels a bad premonition. At that moment, the boy quietly asks her for help. Then he accidentally touches her wound, and the main character quietly cries out. She turns around and says that she is hurt, then wonders why he is crying so much. Raven declares that there is nothing connecting them, so it would be best for her to simply leave. But the main character suddenly says that she knows him and therefore cannot just leave. After saying this, she declares that this boy is her boyfriend. Both Raven and the boy freeze in surprise. Raven asks what she is talking about. The girl calmly replies that he heard her correctly, because she said that this guy is her boyfriend. His Highness is also shocked and tries to understand what she is talking about. And the main character continues. She says that Raven needs to stop this hysterics. If he continues to behave this way, he could end up in serious trouble himself. The young man immediately yells at her to shut up. He declares that she has no right to tell him what to do, and if she says another word in that tone, he will put her and the boy behind her into an eternal sleep. Isel sighs heavily and thinks about what to do now. Then she looks at the boy standing behind her. She notices his legs and asks in surprise if he has wet himself. In response, the boy just continues to cry. Isel realizes that he is still just a child, so there is nothing strange about it. Raven angrily yells at the boy to stop crying, or else he will put him to sleep forever. The main character thinks that she is surrounded by a real madhouse, one madman in front, another behind, and she doesn't understand why she got involved in all this in the first place. But she notices that adults are already coming here, which means it will all be over soon. She doesn't know who this boy is, but there are adults nearby, so everything should be fine. So the young lady tells Raven to stop, because if things continue like this, it will only get worse for him. After these words, the young man finally loses his temper. He throws away the knife and yells at her to shut up. He orders her to shut up again, then pushes her sharply, shouting that she shouldn't dare to give him orders. The main character begins to fall backward, and right behind her stands a young man with silver hair. And he also begins to fall. The young lady tries to grab the boy's hand, but he is already losing his balance. Then the main character rushes after him, and they fall together right into the water. At that moment, someone screams Carl's name in horror. After a while, the young man is breathing heavily and trying to cough, and the young lady can only think about the mess that is happening here. After all, she was only invited to a banquet, but ended up with a wound on her hand and fell into the water. The girl realizes that, as expected, she interfered in vain, but when the young lady gets up, she suddenly feels ill and begins to fall. The butler quickly catches her and asks if she is all right. The young lady feels dizzy and wonders if it is because she fell into the water with her injured arm. She also notices the boy she was protecting crying and asking her not to fall into her usual sleep. Ezel notes that she did not do so, and then wonders who said she would fall into eternal sleep. After all, she has no intention of leaving so soon. After this thought, the young lady closes her eyes, and the boy cries out in horror that she has indeed fallen into an eternal sleep. That same evening, the young lady's father bursts into the room where his daughter is lying. One of the servants tries to stop him and says, "What if he behaves like this? He will find himself in a difficult situation." But the girl's father simply ignores him and immediately goes into the room. If he behaves this way, he will find himself in a difficult situation. But the girl's father simply ignores him and immediately enters the room. He sees his daughter's cold cheeks, her pale face, and her clothes stained with red liquid. And at that moment he thinks, did they not even try to stop the bleeding properly? The man clenches his fists and realizes that she is still just a little girl. He can't believe he let her go to the banquet alone. Gerald tries to calm him down and says that the wound is not serious, so there is no need to worry. But the man sharply asks how he dares to say such a thing when his daughter is in such a state. Gerald asks in bewilderment what he is talking about. Then the young lady's father replies that he would like to see how he would react if his son came back looking like that, and he was told that it wasn't that serious. The brunette just silently seethes. But Bjorn says that wounds that seem trivial to others appear deeper than any serious wounds to him. After all, they were inflicted on his child. It is a wound on the body of his daughter, whom he raised and protected with great care. Even after his business went bankrupt and he abandoned his aristocratic pride, he still did everything he could to protect Isel from the dangerous world. And when he received the news that his beloved daughter had been wounded at a banquet and fallen into a pond, the man tells him not to worry, but the blonde man abruptly asks where the boy is now. Gerald asks in confusion who he is talking about, and Bjorn replies that he is talking about Gerald's son, who injured his daughter's hand. He also demands to know where the boy is now. Gerald tries to remain calm and realizes that even if his son did something wrong, there is still a huge gap between him and Bjorn. In his mind, it is impossible to compare the Duke's grandson and a girl from a side branch of the family. Moreover, the incident involved a girl whom almost no one knows. She comes from a family of bankrupt aristocrats. Even if Raven had caused her much more serious harm, Bjorn, with his modest position, would still have been unable to do anything. Therefore, the man calmly says that he has already severely reprimanded the boy and suggests simply forgetting about the incident. But the blonde man replies that this will not do, and he wants to hear everything personally from the culprit himself. Gerald tries to stop him and asks him to calm down. But Bjorn asks if he really thinks it's possible to turn a blind eye to what happened so easily. Then Gerald says that everyone's circumstances are different. He also asks if the man really thinks he is his equal. Hearing this, the young lady's father finally loses his temper. He grabs his interlocutor by the clothes and sharply asks what the difference between them is. Gerald cries out in horror, not understanding what he is doing. But the blonde man continues to ask furiously how the hell he is different from him. Gerald suddenly realizes that this man is incredibly strong, and Bjorn continues to talk about his daughter. He says that his daughter is now unable to change her bandage on her own, but he still talks about some kind of inequality. Gerald yells at Bjorn to let him go immediately. The young lady's father replies that if children do not repent for their mistakes, it is the parents' duty to hide their misdeeds as quickly as possible, and isn't that what they are doing now? At that moment, the servants rush over and drag the girl's father away. He is still indignantly asking who he is trying to lecture. One of the servants says that if he continues in the same vein, he will create big problems for himself, so it is better to calm down. But the blonde man still demands that Raven be brought to him. He says he needs to hear what happened personally and receive an apology. Gerald responds with surprise, asking if he is seriously demanding an apology after what he has just done. But the young lady's father calmly replies that compared to how he treated the concubine's son, his own actions seem quite fair. The brunette coldly replies that no matter how he tries to explain it, it won't change anything. He then orders the guards to enter immediately. Bjorn realizes that he is in the ducal residence of the Bastille family. A man enters the room, and Gerald realizes that even if he is right, the situation is already out of control. The brunette orders Bjorn to be arrested for daring to grab his clothes. He also claims that Bjorn threatened him, so he should be sent to prison immediately. But the man who entered calmly says that, in his opinion, Bjorn could well have grabbed Gerald by the collar. After all, standing before him is the father of the girl who was stabbed by his own son. Hearing this, the brunette turns around sharply and is greatly surprised. He asks if this is really the girl's father. Meanwhile, the Duke calmly asks what exactly brought them all here. Then he adjusts his son's clothes and says that this does not mean that he did the right thing. The blonde man turns to the Duke, but the Duke calmly replies that he will talk to Gerald about it later. The boy smiles and thinks that his father understands him. He says that the Duke is very busy anyway, so there is no point in wasting time on petty quarrels because he can sort it out himself. But at that moment, the Duke unexpectedly bows his head and says he is very sorry. Gerald looks at him in complete surprise. The Duke explains that children are not to blame for their parents' poor upbringing. Therefore, he asks for his sincere apologies for what happened. Gerald turns to his father and asks what he means. He doesn't understand why there is such a fuss about this fallen aristocrat. At that moment, a voice speaks up, saying that she is not a fallen aristocrat at all. The man turns around and sees His Highness standing before him. The prince calmly says that this girl does not deserve such humiliating words. The man asks in surprise why he is here and what he is talking about. The prince replies that he is talking about the knife. At that moment, other people enter the room. The servants notice the black cloaks and realize that they are the Black Lions. These are Byron's knights, and in front of them stands the same boy. Gerald understands that these knights are famous for each being able to defeat 5 warriors single-handedly. He looks at the boy and wonders why Archduke Byron's knights are following him. Suddenly, a terrible thought strikes him. Could Raven have dared to touch the Archduke's son? At that moment, the young man says that this girl is no ordinary girl. She is his benefactor. Gerald is completely shocked and doesn't know what to say. The young man adds that if the man insults his benefactor again, he will personally rip out his tongue. Gerald is shocked by what he has just heard. The young man calmly says that he is absolutely serious. The young lady's father looks at this guy in amazement. The Duke just smiles calmly, while Gerald gets angrier and can't hide his shock. His Highness realizes that perhaps he shouldn't have brought the boy here. He also wonders if the girl's temperature has risen after falling into the water. But he realizes that even if the boy is the legitimate son of Archduke Byron, it is still very dangerous to insult young Baskerville right in front of the Duke. After all, if the Duke gets angry, the situation will become really serious. However, the man continues to calmly observe what is happening. Gerald tries to pull himself together and says that everyone must still be confused after what happened, so it's best to be careful with such statements. The young man asks why. The man replies that members of the aristocracy must be polite and reserved, as these are basic rules of conduct, even if a person is still young. But the young man replies that aristocrats do not apologize. The man asks in surprise what he is talking about, and the young man continues. He says that he is simply following the rules of etiquette. He adds that he has once again seen the pride of the Baskerville family. He talks about dignity and etiquette, which in fact conceal threats to the archducal family and allow the girl who saved him to be insulted with impunity. And he asks whether such behavior is really considered normal in this country. After that, the young man turns to Ishmael and asks if this is not the case. The blonde man replies confusedly that it is. His Highness is surprised at how confidently the young man speaks. He even wonders if it has something to do with his fever, because usually the young man can barely utter a sentence due to his shyness. Meanwhile, Carl calmly wishes the man to continue to adhere to his principles. Gerald asks in shock what kind of language that is. At that moment, the Duke turns to one of his servants. He orders the boy to be brought here. The servant immediately obeys, and after a while, the young man enters the room. His father immediately asks if it is Raven. Then the Duke addresses the boy directly. He says that he is not a 2-year-old child who is incapable of being responsible for his actions. Therefore, he should come closer immediately. The young man obediently approaches the young lady's father. The Duke looks at him and demands that he apologize immediately. The boy apologizes and begins to say that he just... However, the Duke immediately interrupts him again. He bluntly states that he did not allow the young man to justify himself. These words only frighten the young man even more. The Duke continues and says that the Baskerville family will take responsibility for what happened today. Therefore, he asks them to accept their apologies. The blonde man replies that everything is fine. Then the Duke adds that Bayoran should not worry, because Isol will receive proper treatment. He assures him that there will not even be a trace of the wound. After these words, the Duke turns his gaze to his own son. He bitterly says that he thought he had raised a human being, but in reality, he had raised a beast. Gerald, in shock, turns to his father and hears him say that it's hard to believe that his own son turned out to be worse than a ruthless street thug. The man tries to argue and asks what exactly he means, because he has done nothing wrong. But the Duke sharply orders Gerald to shut up. He then announces that from this moment on, he is stripping him of all his powers. After that, he orders the young man to return to his room and not dare to leave without his permission. Gerald tries to say something to his father, but the Duke only repeats his order and demands that he leave immediately. The young man grits his teeth in anger, but he realizes that he cannot argue, so he silently obeys and leaves. After that, the Duke turns to the young lady's father and asks if he would like a cup of tea. The man replies that he would like some and looks over at the young man, standing next to his daughter. At that moment, the young man gently touches the girl's cheek. He says that she is like a prince on a white horse, and His Highness thinks at that moment that Charles should actually be the prince. Then the young man turns to Ishmael and reminds him that the girl had previously called him her boyfriend. He asks what that means. The blonde guy thinks to himself, could it be that the guy stopped crying just because he didn't understand the meaning of that phrase? His Highness laughs and wonders if the strict upbringing of the Byron family forbids even asking questions about such relationships. After that, he explains that it literally means beloved. The young man is a little surprised and looks at the girl. Then he becomes noticeably embarrassed. He quietly says that this is the first time in his life that he has had a beloved. His Highness is truly shocked by these words. Then he turns to Carl and says that he was just thinking about the words she said back then. But at that moment, the young man takes a strand of the girl's hair in his hand, and His Highness asks if he is listening to him at all. The young man confidently says that if that's the case, then they will have to get married in the future. The blonde man thinks to himself that this is old-fashioned, outdated logic, as if people who start dating are obligated to get married right away. The young man quietly repeats the word beloved again, but in the next second he suddenly falls onto the bed. His Highness quickly tells him to pull himself together and notices that the guy is literally burning up. At this moment, Raven follows her father and addresses him. The man responds coldly. He says that he has never regretted bringing the boy into the world so much in his entire life. Hearing this, the young man asks in confusion what he is talking about. The father replies that the boy is pathetic and stupid. Not only is he incapable of taking care of himself, he also constantly gets in his own father's way. After that, the man says outright that he sincerely regrets that this boy is his child. Hearing these words, the young man doesn't even know what to say. In the end, he just starts laughing and asks if his father really thinks so. And then he awkwardly apologizes. He tries to justify himself, but the man realizes that it is pointless. He needs to return urgently and sort out everything that is happening. The next morning, the main character opens her eyes and tries to understand where she is. The girl remembers that she definitely lost consciousness after falling into the water. But when she gets out of bed, she notices that someone else is lying next to her. The young lady wonders why this child is sleeping here. Azel understands perfectly well that there are other rooms in the house where one could comfortably settle down. So she wonders why he chose this particular place. The girl decides that she will definitely ask him about it when he wakes up. She also notices that he is holding her hand, and it hurts a little. She carefully gets out of bed and thinks that the boy must have been very scared. So she decides not to disturb him, because he is still a child after all. But then the girl feels her throat dry up and goes to get some water. Suddenly, someone addresses her and asks what happened. Then they express surprise that she is already awake. It turns out to be His Highness. He asks if the girl is feeling better, and the young lady wonders why he suddenly started speaking so informally. She reflects that, whatever the case may be, she feels simply awful. In addition, she is very tired. So the girl just drinks her water silently and does not answer his question. The young man just smiles. Then he comes closer and asks if her name is Azel Latanya. The main character replies that it is indeed her and asks who he is. He says his name is Ismail. The girl wonders who he could be, but then remembers seeing him before she fell. Suddenly, they both hear a rustling sound. When they turn around, they notice that the guy has wrapped himself in a blanket. They look at him, trying to understand why he did it. The young lady asks what he is doing there, and if he has been sleeping there all this time. Then His Highness pulls the blanket off the guy, who immediately cries out loudly. His Highness addresses him and demands a quick answer, because the young man said he wanted to say something. The guy with silver hair asks Ismail to wait a moment. But His Highness replies that he needs to speak quickly because there is no time and he will have to return soon. The main character asks anxiously if her boyfriend is okay. She notices that his face has turned completely red. Then she asks if he has a fever. The young man is visibly nervous and says that it's just a minor cold. Azel replies that this could easily happen after an unexpected fall into the water, so it would be better for him to lie down again and rest a little. At this moment, His Highness turns to the young man and reminds him that he should introduce himself first. He also tells him to gather his strength and pull himself together. The young man, red-faced, thanks the girl for saving him. He says his name is Carl. The main character calmly replies that her name is Azel. The boy immediately smiles broadly. The girl looks at him and wonders what good thing has happened to make him so happy. Then she asks how old he is. The young man replies that he is 8. After that, he is about to say something. The young lady looks at him intently and tries to understand what he is going to do. Suddenly, the boy says that in about 12 years, they will be able to do it. The girl is surprised and asks what exactly he is talking about. Then, the guy calmly replies that, of course, he is talking about the wedding. Hearing this, the girl asks again in complete surprise what he is talking about. At this point, His Highness can no longer contain himself and begins to laugh loudly. A little while later, the guy looks very sad. The main character realizes that it was probably difficult for him to take her words seriously. She also realizes that for a moment she herself forgot that he is still a child. Meanwhile, Ismail turns to Carl and tells him to cheer up a little. The young man responds with a quiet agreement. But then he looks at the main character with tears in his eyes. The girl suddenly notices the unusual golden hue of his eyes. She realizes that she has never met anyone with eyes like this before, and although she is sure she has never seen them before, for some reason they seem painfully familiar to her. His Highness tells the young man that time is running out and it is time for him to leave, so he should say goodbye quickly. The young man apologizes and says that he seems to have misunderstood everything, but the main character immediately replies that he should not apologize. She says that she herself was the cause of this misunderstanding, and if he continues to apologize, she will only feel awkward. The young man remains silent for a moment, then says that if she ever has business in the Duchy of Byron, she should definitely seek him out. He promises that she will be treated like royalty. He also adds that if she ever needs help, she can turn to him at any time, and since she saved his life, he will definitely help her, even if it means sacrificing his own life. Isel replies that such extremes are completely unnecessary, and then suddenly asks if he just said Byron. The young man replies that he is. He introduces himself fully, saying that his name is Carl Berg Byron. Hearing this, the main character suddenly realizes that she has heard this surname somewhere before. The girl looks at the guy in shock. His surname is Byron, his eyes shine like gold, and his hair is ash-colored. At that moment, the girl feels that these thoughts are driving her crazy. After all, she is standing before the main character, the very character who will survive in a ruined world, plunge the Demon King into eternal sleep, and become the emperor of the next generation. The girl recalls the description from the novel. It said that the wind blows his ash-colored hair, perfectly matching the view of the ruined city, and even when his sword cuts through the air, striking the hidden monsters, his gaze remains as sharp as that of a predatory beast, and as cold as ice. That is exactly how he was described in the book. But now she is standing in front of a weak and shy boy who is nothing like the legendary hero. The girl understands this perfectly well. She realizes that everything matches, his first and last name, his appearance. But his character is completely different. Meanwhile, the young man says goodbye to Isel. She looks at him and wonders if the fate of the whole world really rests on these small shoulders, and what must happen over the next 10 years for him to change so much. A little later, the teacher holds some papers in his hands and says that he will announce the exam results only next week. He then adds that everyone is free for the day. The students agree and begin to disperse. The young lady also holds her work in her hands and just sighs heavily. Then she turns to Lancy and says it's time to go. But when she notices that the blonde is crying, she immediately asks what happened. With tears in her eyes, the girl hugs Isel and complains that she has failed everything. The main character thinks that this is no longer even a dialect, but a real cry from the heart. She looks at her friend's test and realizes that she really did fail. The blonde asks through tears what she should do now. Isel replies that first she should just accept the fact that she failed the exam. The main character wonders what words she should say to comfort a small child, and she remembers that in her past life, she was an orphan and had no choice but to study hard. For her, failing an exam was almost impossible. Now the main character turns to Lancia and says that everything is fine. She adds that happiness does not depend on grades at all. After these words, the blonde, although with tears in her eyes, looks a little happier. But the main character continues and says that this does not mean that one should be happy about bad grades. After all, it is much more pleasant to receive praise for good results. Hearing this, the blonde starts crying again. At that moment, someone addresses Isel. The girl turns around and sees her teacher, after which she realizes that the time has come. She turns to Lancia, who replies that she knows. After all, the girl is going there again. The young lady asks if she wants to go with her. Lancia asks in surprise if she can. The girl replies that she thinks she can, just this once. Besides, exams are over, so they can go there and then play together. The blonde immediately takes her friend by the hand and happily says that they should hurry up then. The main character realizes that she herself goes there 3 times a week. The girl also realizes that if someone else heard about this, they would call it complete nonsense. But Vahidman accepted the terms that Bayerik offered as an apology for the incident with Raven. In fact, Vahidman could have refused. But wanting to smooth things over and showing interest in Isel, he agreed anyway. Thanks to this, Isel now often appears in different places. At this point, the blonde says that, by the way, she hasn't seen that boy at all lately. The main character asks who she is talking about. Could it be Raven? The blonde replies that yes, he did. He showed up in class a couple of times after the banquet, and then stopped coming to class altogether. After that, she asks if something happened to him. The main character replies that she doesn't know herself. She realizes that she also noticed his absence, but decided not to pay attention to it because she doesn't particularly want to worry about someone like him. The fact that the guy threatened a member of the Byron family never left the walls of the ducal residence. Everyone who witnessed that day was ordered to remain silent, and no one dared to discuss the incident. Isel herself did not ask any questions, and Wahidman never brought up the subject either. But still, such an incident could hardly pass without consequences. After all, this was the Byron family. Even Baskley would find it difficult to avoid punishment for attempting to assassinate Prince Byron, a member of the imperial family. Therefore, it does not matter what status that person has. But the main character still thinks that she does not like this whole situation at all. At this moment, the Duke turns to the girl and asks if she came with her friend today. The blonde introduces herself and says her name is Lancia Ermundo. The Duke bows slightly in response and says that he knows the Ermundo family well. He explains that his great-great-grandfather's younger brother once moved to the other end of the country, started a family business there, and now their families are good business partners. Then he gently strokes the girl's head and asks how Count Zakal Ermund is doing. The girl replies that her father is well. The Duke says he is glad to hear it, and adds that Count Ermundo is an honest nobleman with a wonderful character, so he hopes that everything will continue to go well for him. At this time, the main character looks at the task that Vahidman gave her. But then she turns around and notices one of the documents. It mentions some kind of festival. The young lady remembers that this festival is held every year and is always very large scale, and she begins to wonder if this is an official document. Meanwhile, the Duke turns to the girls and tells them to help themselves. They thank him. Then the man asks how today's test went. The young lady notes to herself that he also likes to ask questions that she really doesn't want to answer. But she still hands him her work. The Duke looks at her and says that now she has an exam to take, not her usual lessons. The young lady is surprised and wonders where this exam came from. At that moment, the Duke says to come in. The young lady turns around. She sees a young man with blue hair. She can't help but think how handsome he is. The Duke addresses him and asks him to introduce himself. He calmly says that his name is Elias Yulgert Vezianzal, but he can be called Las for short. The main character feels that she has heard this name somewhere before. Suddenly, she realizes something with shock. Isn't that the name of the main character in the novel? In the book, the main character and many other characters were in love with this girl. She was the only character in the entire story who had a real harem. The main character in the novel was incredibly intelligent, had an excellent memory, and was an excellent shot. Her archery skills were enhanced by spiritual power. Elias never needed the help of men. Right now, the young lady is experiencing a strange feeling. It's as if she herself had some important skill, but she can't remember what it was, even though it played a very important role. She also realizes that she hated this character. After all, Elias Yulgert ended up falling into an eternal sleep at a fairly early age because she was connected to enemies. But she did not do it of her own free will. Her younger brother was taken hostage, and she simply had no choice but to pass on important information to the enemies. After that, she was unable to cope with her guilt and fell into an eternal sleep herself. So now the girl wonders who could possibly love the main character, who ends up with such a fate. But now she is confused by something else entirely. Why is this character portrayed as a boy and not a girl? She begins to think that maybe it is the heroine's younger brother, who just happens to have the same name. But then she remembers that the age difference between them must be about 10 years. Meanwhile, Elias asks why the girl is staring at him so intently. The young lady realizes that she is indeed staring, quickly apologizes, and says that this man is simply very handsome. She immediately realizes that this definitely cannot be the younger brother of the heroine. The blonde next to her thinks that this guy really does look incredibly handsome. The man with blue hair thanks her for the compliment, but says that such a comparison is not appropriate for a man. The main character wonders what is so strange about calling a man handsome, or maybe he reacted that way on purpose so that no one would guess anything. The Duke asks everyone to sit down first. The man with blue hair looks through the documents. Then he says that he heard from the Duke that Isel prevented an accident. He asks if this is true. The main character replies that, to be honest, she just happened to help. But he replies that there are no accidents in this world. Therefore, one should not attribute everything to luck. After these words, the young lady silently looks at the Duke, as if waiting for an explanation. The man just remains calmly silent. And the young lady thinks what a strange way of teaching this is. The man with blue hair says that this is enough, and the rest of the interview will take place at the workplace. The main character asks in surprise what this is all about. She wonders if this is some kind of interview. Elias replies that it is. He adds that this means she has already passed the first stage. The main character is even more surprised and wonders what kind of interview this is. Then the man with blue hair says that Duke Baskiel recommended her for the position of assistant, but the main character immediately says that she is only 8 years old. The man with blue hair replies that age doesn't matter. The main thing is her abilities. Isel understands that there is some truth in this, but she still wonders what an 8-year-old child can do. At that age, children usually just go to school and play with toys. The man with blue hair explains that everyone who recommended her noted the same qualities. She has an excellent memory, learns quickly, and is very educated for her age because she reads a lot of books. The main character asks who exactly recommended her. In response, she hears that it was His Excellency Baskiel, her teacher, and even her parents. The girl wonders in surprise when they even had time to do that. The man with blue hair adds that being an assistant does not mean following him around every day. He explains that it is enough for them to meet only once a week. On that day, she will come to his work instead of her usual lessons. He also assures her that there is no need to worry because such practice will only help her learning. Then, the main character asks where exactly this will take place. The blue-haired man replies that she will find out when she gets there. The young lady thinks this is rather cruel. She still doesn't understand how this relates to the exam, so she asks if this was the exam. The Duke replies that the point of the exam is to understand its essence for herself and find the right answer. And, according to him, there is nothing complicated about it. Isel says in surprise that she is only 8 years old, and they are already putting her through such trials. She realizes that the Duke clearly has no intention of explaining anything. She begins to wonder whether she will be able to pass this test at all, without even knowing the rules. The man says that the task is indeed difficult, but if she succeeds, she will receive a gift. Isel wonders how difficult this exam must be if they are even promising a gift for passing it. A week later, the girl looks in amazement at the place where she has been taken, and finally understands where she is. She asks if she really needs to go in there. The man with blue hair calmly replies that, of course, she does. Isel begins to wonder whether it is appropriate to bring an 8-year-old child to the mine. She is well aware that working in a mine is very dangerous, and by law, only adult men are permitted to work there. During the days of slavery, only slaves worked in the mines, and when those difficult times ended, only adult men were hired to work there. The young lady holds a protective helmet in her hands and realizes that this work is hard, dirty, and very dangerous. So she begins to wonder what a little girl is doing in a place like this. And the same can be said about Elias himself, who is now dressed as a man. And most of all, she doesn't want to breathe dust because she understands perfectly well how harmful it is to her health. At this moment, Elias asks the young lady with interest if anyone has ever told her what exactly he does. The girl takes a book out of her bag and confidently says that she will show him right now. She explains that her work involves creating maps. She makes maps while traveling to places where there are no roads yet or where these roads are not yet marked, and this time she has been asked to add a mine to the map. Isel suddenly realizes that she has finally remembered. It is precisely that distinctive skill possessed by the main character, whose name she had been trying to remember for so long. Elias. Animism skills were not outstanding. However, she had completely new and unusual ways of working with spiritual power. For example, she could imbue arrows with spiritual energy. In addition, she knew how to create maps and read them. Elias became a real compass for traveling in places where there were no roads or maps, and this talent manifested itself in her even as a child. At this moment, the lady with blue hair turns to the main character and asks if she is listening. Meanwhile, Isel thinks that if this girl is doing so well on her own, then why does she need her at all? Then the girl hands the young lady some kind of object. She asks curiously what it is, and the lady with blue hair explains that it is a map she made earlier, because the tunnels here are very complex and winding. Therefore, even if you redraw the map, it may differ slightly. The girl calmly says that all that is required is to simply transfer the data from this map to a blank sheet of paper. Isel wonders if it would be better to entrust such a task to an adult. She finds it strange that such important work is entrusted to children, one of whom is not even 10 years old. And she can't help but wonder if anyone in this country has ever heard of a labor code. Isel honestly admits that she has never done anything like this before. She cautiously asks if she can help in any way, but the lady with blue hair confidently says that it's not difficult at all, and she'll do just fine. Besides, going into the mine itself would be too dangerous for her, so let the girl stay here. She promises to return later. And the main character wonders to herself if this means she won't have to go into the mine at all. The girl suggests that the young lady sit here quietly, because she will be back soon. The main character agrees, but after a moment, she begins to wonder if everything is all right with this girl. After all, she hasn't done anything wrong. Therefore, the main character does not understand why she should hide her gender. And it's not even that she is a girl. She is much more surprised by how a child can do such work at all. The young lady also realizes that she doesn't ask Elias personal questions. For example, why she dresses as a man or what her relationship with Wahidman is. These topics may be too difficult, so it's better to focus on something else for now. After that, the young lady begins to transfer the map and quickly realizes that there is much more work here than she initially thought. She tries her best, carefully redrawing the lines. But suddenly, a strange rustling sound reaches her ears, and she wonders what it was. The next moment, she even feels as if the ground has moved slightly. And then she hears a real rumbling. In complete shock, she wonders if it's an earthquake. But then she tries to figure out where the sound is coming from and quickly decides that she needs to hide somewhere. When the young lady comes out of the tent, she notices that there is thick dust all around. But looking at the workers, she is surprised by their calmness. Isn't an earthquake in a mine considered the most terrible natural disaster? Ezel understands that the ground could collapse at any moment. And besides, Elias is still inside the mine. Suddenly, someone addresses her and asks what the young lady is doing here. The main character is startled by the unexpected question. She turns around and asks in surprise what is going on and how this person got here. But Elias calmly explains that he came out of another tunnel because there are at least 3 of them in this mine. Then she asks what the young lady was doing. The main character replies that nothing special, just an earthquake. Elias asks again if she is talking about an earthquake and suddenly starts smiling. The young lady does not understand why she is laughing. The girl explains that she simply forgot to warn her because it wasn't an earthquake at all. There is an artillery range nearby, and during exercises, the ground shakes like this every time. Ezel asks if that means there are exercises going on there now, and suddenly she realizes that, come to think of it, the ground did shake a couple of times, and then it became quiet again. Elias explains that the testing ground is quite far away. In addition, the mines here are deep and sturdy, so such strikes cannot destroy them. Local miners have been working here for many years and have long been accustomed to this. Therefore, no one even reacts. After that, the girl gently brushes the dirt off Ezel's shoulder and quietly says that this is precisely why. She shouldn't worry either. Then she gently strokes the main character's head. But almost immediately she pulls her hand away, as if surprised by her own gesture, and awkwardly adds that in any case it is completely normal. After that, she suggests taking a look at what the girl has managed to do. They go into the tent and Elias carefully checks the map. After examining the work, she says that it turned out perfectly. That's enough so the young lady can go back. The young lady asks if she really has to go back alone. Elias replies that he still has things to do, and the carriage is already waiting for her there. After that, she says goodbye. A little later, when the main character returns to the estate, the Duke immediately asks what happened to her. The girl thinks to herself, is he really asking me that? And then she remembers how she was frightened by the loud noise and fell down. The man says she needs to take a bath immediately. He then orders the maid to prepare the water, and she immediately agrees. After that, he tries to brush the dirt off the young lady's clothes and asks how the exam went. Then he notices her pensive gaze and asks what she is looking at. The young lady replies that she was thinking about what the exam was really about. The Duke asks if she managed to figure it out. The young lady asks if the point of the exam is not to find out who this person really is. The man calmly asks why she decided that, and the young lady replies that this person is not close to him at all. Moreover, this job has nothing to do with her knowledge. After these words, the man asks if she is ready to answer the question. If she really understood the meaning of the exam, what answer would she give? But the young lady honestly says that she does not know. That is precisely why she asked who this man really is. The Duke is slightly surprised by this answer. The girl calmly adds that therefore she should not be the one to answer this question, and she quietly asks, "Isn't that right, Your Excellency?" The man says that she has come to a rather outrageous conclusion. He notes that the people who raised her would hardly approve of such actions. In essence, she has simply decided to shift all responsibility onto him. However, he adds that he cannot simply answer her question. At this point, the main character begins to wonder why he is so careful to hide Elias' identity. The Duke silently hands the girl a bag. She looks at him in surprise and asks what it is. The young lady opens the bag and sees gold inside. The Duke calmly confirms that it is indeed gold, and the girl realizes that she already knows this very well. But she has no idea what to do with it now. An old saying pops into her head. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Meanwhile, the Duke says that if she can double the gold in the bag, then all of its contents will be hers as a reward. The young lady is genuinely surprised by this proposal, but the man calmly continues. If she loses all of the gold, she will never be able to cross the threshold of this mansion again. The young lady thinks that this grumpy old man is at it again. She begins to wonder what she can do to stop all this. After much deliberation, she realizes that it is impossible to stop the inevitable. Therefore, she comes to the conclusion that she simply needs to save money, buy an island, and hide there. But then she remembers that she is only 8 years old. Can a child of that age even organize all this? There are too many limitations, and she realizes that she has very few options. The young lady realizes that because of this, she has almost no options. And after a while, she finds herself in a different place. One of the workers notices her and asks what brought such a little girl here. He also wonders if she is one of the aristocrats. Then he asks if her parents are here. The young lady replies that they are not. Then the man asks why she came here and if she understands what kind of place this is. The girl just smiles calmly, and the guy immediately understands from this smile that she really doesn't seem to know. At that moment, a woman approaches them and asks what is going on. The young man replies that it seems the girl is simply lost. The woman asks indignantly if she is a beggar. If so, the young man should just send her away. But the young man notices that the girl does not look like a beggar at all. Meanwhile, the main character looks around and suddenly realizes that the feeling is familiar to her. She didn't meet Ninetales often, but as a child she worked in a well-known bar in the capital. It was a place where rich people came, dreaming of hitting the jackpot. Working there, she heard many different stories, and it was then that she first learned about Ninetales. Unlike other information guilds, which usually hid in gloomy and dark places, these people settled right in a busy area. And now, watching one of the waiters, the young lady finally realizes that she has come to the right place. Meanwhile, one of the employees asks, what if the girl really is from an aristocratic family? So he suggests checking it out first. But then he is shocked to see where the child has suddenly gone. The main character approaches a young man with red hair and looks directly at him with a slight smile. The guy asks if she needs anything. The main character notices that he is talking to her very politely and does not even call her a child. In response, she simply gestures for him to lean closer. The young man makes the same gesture, and then the girl quietly asks if he is Vesemir Winston. The man asks in surprise if she knows him, and the girl realizes that it is indeed him. After that, she addresses him directly as Ninetales. The guy is visibly surprised. The main character calmly says that she is looking at the very Ninetales who is willing to do anything for money. The guy looks at her coldly. Then he grabs her sharply and tells her to follow him. One of the employees, in shock, asks what is going on and where he is going, because they need to work. After a while, the girl is already sitting on the sofa, and the guy slowly turns to her. The main character notices his gaze and begins to think about what to do next. She is just a child and is not even obliged to create an atmosphere for serious negotiations. So the young lady just smiles. The guy asks who sent her here, and the girl replies that it was Ezel Latanya. The man asks in surprise who that is. The girl calmly replies that it is her. The guy pauses for a second, wondering if he heard her correctly, and then asks if she thinks this is the right time for jokes. But the young lady assures him that it is not a joke at all. The red-haired young man looks at her intently and says that he will ask the question again. Why did she come to him? The young lady replies that she came specifically to meet him. Then the guy asks how she managed to find him and who sold her the information. The girl smiles and replies that it was also Ezel Latanya. The red-haired boy starts to get angry and thinks that the girl is just making fun of him. He says he doesn't know what this kid is thinking, but if she doesn't tell the truth, she could be in big trouble. He adds that if she doesn't want to know what he's talking about, she'd better answer the question honestly. But the girl insists that she has already told the whole truth and asks why he doesn't believe her. The man begins to wonder what is going on. Any normal child would have burst into tears long ago because of such a tense and threatening atmosphere, and now he is trying to understand who she really is. The young lady calmly says that she found out who he is and where he works. She came to him because she needs him. Then she asks if it sounds like a lie, but the man replies that he just can't believe it. Then Ezel says she understands how unbelievable it sounds. But she has heard that there are people who have been buying and selling information since the age of 7. The young man is shocked to realize that he has never told anyone about this, and those who knew him at that age have long since fallen into an eternal sleep because they were involved in rather shady business. He begins to wonder how this girl knows about him, then he asks who she is and where she got all this information. He even wonders if she might be a god. The young lady just looks at him calmly. She understands perfectly well that Kalium, she is the goddess of daggers, beer, and betrayal, and Vesemir was her devoted follower. The girl also remembers that the nickname Ninetales is associated with a wolf that Kalium once raised. She wonders if perhaps this was Kalium's way of protecting herself. But usually people first ask who could have leaked the information, and this man immediately went to such extremes. And now the young lady realizes that thanks to this, she won't even have to explain anything, so she just smiles. Then she confidently says that she came after receiving a revelation from Kalium. The girl understands that this is a lie, but she read the book, so you could say that she received a revelation from the author. The man doesn't know how to respond. The thought swirls in his head that the orphan who was wandering around the hall suddenly turned out to be a messenger of the deity he had believed in all his life. He slowly falls to his knees. Looking at his trembling hands, the man begins to cry. The main character looks at him and doesn't understand why he suddenly burst into tears. And now she suddenly feels a strange sense of responsibility. But now she realizes that she needs to focus. Now is not the time to feel guilty, because the whole world is in danger. The young lady gently strokes his head and smiles, saying that Vesemir Winston has accomplished a great deal during this time. The man folds his arms and looks at the girl with tears in his eyes, and in the next second he suddenly rushes to embrace her. He begins to cry loudly. The young lady panics, wondering if he could cry a little more quietly, because if he continues to squeeze her like this, she will suffocate. After a while, the guy finally apologizes. He says he didn't know who she was, so he was rude. The young lady says it's okay, and adds that she has a request. The guy immediately tells her to speak, because he will help her in any way he can. However, the young lady asks him not to call her that, and to just call her Ezel. At that moment, she also wonders whether he really needs to kneel down. The young man replies that he understands she wants to keep everything secret, and that he completely understands her. The main character begins to wonder if he has always been this way. After all, he was described completely differently in the book. There, he seemed cynical, straightforward, and even cruel. Although, perhaps she just remembered something incorrectly. The young lady puts her hand on his shoulder and calmly says that the world is in danger. The guy asks in surprise if she just said, "The world." The girl confirms that yes, the world is doomed, and that is why she came to him. At the same time, she understands that if someone heard their conversation now, they would surely think that they were both crazy. The young man thinks for a moment. The main character tries to understand whether he believes her. The guy says he doesn't know if the end of the world is coming. But she wouldn't have come to him for no reason, so he believes her. The main character realizes that he really believes her and says that's fine. First, she will need his help. The guy asks what kind of help she needs. He reminds her that he only sells information. But the young lady replies that this is more than enough, because his skills could be very useful. Then she asks what time he finishes work. She needs to go somewhere and wonders if they can go there after work. But the young man says he has already finished. He immediately takes off his jacket and throws it aside. After that, he declares that she found him in order to save the whole world. This means he cannot just sit idly by. They need to leave immediately. The young lady asks in surprise if this is possible. The young man confidently replies that of course it is. At that moment, the employer, in shock, calls out to him and asks what he is doing. How could he just take the child away? But the young man calmly hands him an envelope. The man looks at it and asks in surprise if it is a resignation letter. The young man replies with a smile that their working relationship has not been the most pleasant, so he hopes they will never meet again. Easel asks if he has been carrying his resignation letter with him all this time. The guy replies that, doesn't every employee keep such a letter close to their heart? The main character involuntarily wonders if this is really the case. The guy says that now he is free and asks where they should go. The young lady shows him the way. In her heart, she hopes that she has chosen the right person. But in any case, there is no turning back. Now the main thing is that everything works out. The young lady also understands that the place where many business deals are concentrated and huge amounts of money circulate is the largest investment company in the capital. A young man with red hair looks at the building and asks if they really came here. He says that it is an investment company, but shouldn't they be saving the world? The girl calmly replies that everything is correct. Then she suggests they just go inside. The guy agrees and decides that if that's what needs to be done, then so be it. They go inside and immediately notice a wide variety of people. There are aristocrats, commoners, and even beggars. The main character realizes that there is only one reason why all these people have gathered here. And that reason is money. Each of them came here to earn money. And in the end, she herself came here for the same reason. The girl recalls the words that if she can double the contents of the bag, all the gold will be hers. At first, it seemed like a strange and overly specific task to her. But now, looking around, she realizes that it's not so bad. She can actually do it, although doubling the contents of the bag will still be difficult. Of course, Vahidman would surely know how to do this, but the girl understands that for all the economic lessons he gave her, he never once demanded that she double the money in such a short time. Besides, he said that if she lost all the gold, she shouldn't come back, but she left some of the gold at home and took the rest with her. The red-haired young man addresses her as if she were a messenger of God. The main character reminds him that she asked to be called simply Easel. He agrees and says, "Mrs. Easel." The young lady sighs mentally, wondering if it is necessary to add the word Mrs. Then she realizes that it's probably better not to argue and leave things as they are. After that, she points in one direction. The man asks if she wants to invest there. The young lady confirms. The guy asks in surprise why she needs it. The girl calmly replies that she needs money. The young man asks again why she needs money. He adds that people can simply give money if it is a matter of saving the world. The girl recalls that he grew up in dark alleys and roamed the dirty streets since childhood. That's why he seems so naive. She wonders who would give money just because someone says it's to save the world. Then she reflects that few people would believe such a thing. The young lady says that she has already warned him not to tell anyone what she is doing now. The young man agrees. The main character adds that saving the world requires more than just faith and conviction. After all, money can save the world. The young man respectfully says that this is exactly the answer he expected from her. The young lady looks around and realizes one important thing. She knows about events in the distant future, but not about the immediate future. However, this does not prevent her from making a good investment. She thinks about famine. The end of the world rarely happens instantly. There is a rule of 1 to 10 and 1 to 100, when dozens and hundreds of events happen first, before one big one happens. And the first thing that comes to her mind is famine. The young lady understands that this happens especially often in the provinces, where there are years of poor harvests. The book mentions many times how people suffered from the lack of crops. Therefore, she should invest in this particular area. The girl notices one advertisement. It is for a guild that buys and sells grain, as well as fruit and vegetables in large quantities. She then says that they need to go to the guild's office. After a while, they arrive there. The girl behind the counter asks what business they have there. The young lady replies that she wants to invest. The employee asks in surprise if she really wants to invest. Then she looks at the girl and says that it is better to contact someone else for investments. To the separate consultation desk, not here. But the man immediately says that he will not be investing. He points to the young lady and says that she will be the investor. The girl behind the counter is slightly surprised and wonders why the adult is speaking with such respect. Besides, he never once called her a child. Then she asks if the girl is from a noble family. The main character replies that you could say that, although she understands to herself that in reality she is just a ruined noblewoman. The girl behind the counter smiles and says she understands. She then suggests taking a look at this brochure, which describes Revenettle in detail. It also explains how to invest. The young lady holds her money in her hands and realizes one thing. She doesn't really like this sudden change in attitude towards her, but she also understands that for a place where money rules, this is perfectly normal. After that, she puts the bag of gold on the table. The girl next to her continues to explain that if the young lady looks there, she will see the Southern Grain Store. It is not widely known, but it still has its value. When the bag is opened and gold bars spill out, the worker simply freezes. She looks at the gold in obvious shock, as if she can't believe her eyes. The red-haired young man also does not hide his surprise. The worker cautiously asks what it is, then begins to count the bars. After that, she asks what exactly the young lady is going to invest in, but the girl calmly replies that she did not actually come for investments at all. The girl asks in surprise why she is here then. The young lady points to the paper in her hands and explains that she wants to buy grain at the South Grain Storage Facility to start with. The woman just looks at her in confusion. A little later, the young lady is already talking to another person. The man says that, of course, he is concerned that she will not encounter any problems. The main character thanks him and then asks him to arrange for the grain to be transported from the South Grain Storage Facility directly to the mansion. Isel realizes that there is not much grain in the South Grain storehouse right now. Therefore, she decides to take the part that has already been harvested. The man agrees and says that everything will be shipped in a week. The young lady responds with a satisfied smile, saying that this is just wonderful. After that, she finds herself back in the arms of the red-haired young man. The guy asks if she's finished her business. The girl replies that she is for now, but she has a job for him. He immediately asks what it is, and the young lady says she needs to spread certain information. The young man assumes that she wants to spread rumors so that she can later sell grain at a high price. He even suggests telling people that a poor harvest is expected. But the young lady notes that few people are likely to believe this, and the price will remain virtually unchanged. Then the young man asks what exactly he should do. The young lady just smiles mysteriously. She then explains that they need to spread the news that a big festival is coming soon to the capital. The man asks in surprise what she is talking about. He tries to understand how a festival could possibly affect the price of grain. The girl calmly confirms that this is indeed the case. She asks him to add that the festival will be so grand that people will come from other countries to attend. The young lady understands one simple thing. Festivals and grain are as closely related as beer and bread. Therefore, they still have a lot of work ahead of them. When the young lady's father sees the huge number of sacks, he asks in surprise what they are. The girl calmly replies that they are grain. The man sighs and says that he can see that perfectly well. But then he asks why all this grain ended up in their storage room. The young lady replies that it's simple. She bought it. The man asks in astonishment if she really bought all of it. Then he asks her where she got the money. The young lady recalls how the Spencer family once went through hard times. Their business collapsed, and they were so poor that sometimes they could barely afford even a single grain of corn. For a long time, they survived on sparse soup and stale bread. But now, everything seems to be changing. The girl now works as a secretary for the Baskerville family. Therefore, her father believes that she no longer has the same problems. However, a troubling thought occurs to him. What if she used money that he does not know about? He cautiously asks if someone gave her the funds. He knows that sometimes adults use children to transport money and launder it. Such people often work with fast-moving goods, so they could have slipped her some grain for such purposes. The young lady understands that her father is simply worried about her, so she calmly explains that the Duke gave her the money. The man asks in surprise if she is talking about Duke Basquille, and is it true that he gave her the gold? The girl confirms this. Moreover, he gave her a task to double the amount she received. Therefore, if she loses everything, she will no longer be able to receive his guidance. The man begins to vaguely understand the situation. It is difficult for him to imagine why the Duke would give Isel gold and ask her to double it. He knows that sometimes you even have to go into debt for successful investments, and so he wonders if this test is too difficult. Then he asks if that is why she decided to buy grain. The girl nods calmly. The young lady points to one of the sacks and asks for it to be moved to another place. The man thinks that grain is usually very cheap. Unless there are natural disasters or something similar, its price rises and falls fairly evenly. Therefore, it is almost impossible to double the cost of grain. And he begins to think about how all this could work. At this moment, the young lady's mother gently strokes her head. She says that Ezel surely has some kind of plan. The girl calmly agrees. Her mother adds that it would be better if her father stopped worrying and instead asked how he could help. The man is a little embarrassed, but agrees nonetheless. He asks his daughter if there is anything he can do to help. The young lady replies that there is. The man immediately asks what exactly needs to be done. The main character hands him a small piece of paper. The man takes it and begins to read what is written on it. The list includes a watermill, a flour mill, and a malt cellar. He asks in surprise what it all means. The young lady explains that she wants to get in touch with people who do these kinds of things. The man looks at the list in complete amazement. And the young lady's mother watches this with a gentle smile. She says that their daughter is simply wonderful. The father also looks at Ezel and smiles involuntarily, then becomes pensive. He wonders what could possibly go wrong. Meanwhile, a little later, the Duke receives a report from one of his servants. He asks in surprise if the girl really bought grain. The servant confirms that she did, and in quite a large quantity. Moreover, she used the Duke's money and bought grain from the South Grain store. The Duke thinks about it. He realizes that he never taught the young lady such a strategy. Ezel only studied basic economic principles, and there were no complex investments in her lessons. So now he wonders whether the girl even understands the concept of buying and then investing. Besides, grain is a commodity with a very slow turnover. But then the Duke just smiles and says that this child still acts completely unpredictably. He adds that he thinks the girl will handle everything herself, therefore it is not worth interfering. The butler agrees and notes that the Duke has been smiling a lot lately. He hardly ever saw him smile before. The headman turns to the butler again and asks what Gerald and Raven are doing now. The butler replies that Raven undergoes daily training so that such a situation does not happen again. And young Master Gerald, in fact, he does nothing. The Duke asks if this means that he stays in his room all the time. The butler confirms that this is the case. He even eats there and has not left since the Duke put him on probation. Wahidman thinks to himself how pathetic this guy looks, although he is power-hungry and very capable. At one time, he was even ahead of Enoch, despite being younger. But still, the Duke always valued Enoch more than Gerald. The reason is simple. Enoch was better at achieving real success. There is a huge difference between Gerald, who always chooses the safe path, and Enoch, who sometimes takes the winding road. And that difference is that Gerald has always presented himself as a typical aristocrat. He is equally weak in front of the strong, and strong in front of the weak. Therefore, he not only strikes blows, but also often receives them himself. And yet he would like this child to be at least half like him. At this moment, one of the workers asks, with obvious surprise, if they really want to sign a contract for the use of the watermill. The main character understands one thing. Initially, anyone could use the watermills. All they had to do was pay. No contracts were required, and the mills themselves were often rented out, so there was no particular demand for contracts. The guy still doesn't understand and asks why she wants to sign a contract. The young lady calmly replies. She says she needs it. However, the man points out that she can use the watermill, and she doesn't need to sign anything. It's enough to just pay and use the mill as much as she needs. The main character replies that she is well aware of this. But despite this, she still wants to sign the contract and is even willing to make an advance payment. The man begins to wonder whether it makes sense to sign a contract with such a small mill, and even more so to take an advance payment. After that, he asks how much she intends to pay. The young lady shows the number on her fingers. The man looks at it and tries to understand if she is really talking about 2 silver coins. The man realizes that the amount is not small, but for some reason, he still feels a strange disappointment. However, the next moment, the main character takes out 2 gold bars and calmly asks if that will be enough. The guy is simply stunned with surprise. Another worker immediately exclaims that this is more than enough. He adds that if she tells them when she needs the mill, they will free up a week for her, or even 10 days if necessary. The man is also delighted and thinks that for a week's work with the mill, he usually gets a maximum of 20 silver coins. And here, she is offering 2 gold coins right away. The main character just smiles quietly. A little later, she is already holding the document in her hands. It's a signed contract. At this point, the man turns to her and asks if she wants to discuss the exact date later. Ezel replies that she will. She will let them know the date later. The men nod and say they will wait for her decision. Meanwhile, her father watches his daughter. But then he asks if it is really necessary to buy all these mills. The girl confidently replies that it is. She says that later he will understand why all this is necessary. Then she asks where the places he mentioned earlier are located. Her father replies that the carriage is ready and they can leave right now. The girl smiles happily and says that they should hurry up then. After that, she takes her father by the hand. The man just smiles gently. Looking at his daughter, he wonders what thoughts are hidden in her little head. Time gradually passes, and after a while, the blonde girl turns to Izel. With tears in her eyes, she asks what happened. The main character asks in surprise what she is talking about. Lancia replies that the girl has been gone for 2 whole weeks. What's more, she hasn't even sent a single message, and she just didn't know what to think. At one point, she even decided that that idiot had done something to her again, and if it turned out that it really was him, she would grab the guy herself and literally tear him to pieces. The main character quickly asks Lancia to calm down and says that she is fine. The blonde is still skeptical and asks if it's true. Izel assures her that everything is really fine, but thinks to herself that when this girl is angry, she looks pretty scary. After calming down a little, the blonde asks why her friend skipped class. Izel replies that she had important things to do. Then she points to the workers nearby and says that the matter concerns them specifically. The girl immediately asks what these people have to do with her absence. Izel explains that it all has to do with a task that the Duke recently gave her. The blonde looks at the huge amount of grain and begins to wonder what they are going to do with it now. And in the end, she comes to a rather strange conclusion. She cautiously asks her friend if she is involved in slavery. The main character is completely shocked and replies that this is not the case at all. She asks in surprise what strange thoughts have come into her head since slavery was abolished long ago. After that, she explains that, to put it simply, it all has to do with reselling goods. The blonde doesn't understand what that means. The young lady realizes that the concept is too complicated for her. So she explains everything in detail. In response, the blonde asks if she simply stocked up on grain so she could bake a lot of bread later. Izel agrees, but adds that she is not yet sure if everything will work out as she planned. Lancia immediately says with confidence that her friend will definitely succeed. The young lady asks in surprise if she really thinks so. The blonde replies that, of course, it will work out. After all, she has never met anyone smarter than Izel in her life. Hearing this, Izel smiles gently and strokes her friend's head. The girl smiles back. But suddenly she remembers something and says that Teacher Velen asked her to pass on a message. He said that Izel should come see him tomorrow if she has time. The main character is surprised and asks why. The girl replies that she doesn't know, he just asked her to pass on the message. Izel begins to wonder why Velen wants to see her. It occurs to her that perhaps they found a mistake in the last exam. The blonde notices that her friend seems to be getting ready to go somewhere. She even says that Izel has changed into different clothes. The girl replies that yes, she needs to go somewhere. Lancia immediately asks if she can go with her. The main character replies that she can, but it might be a little dangerous. The girl looks around and notices knights in one of the windows. And then she realizes one thing. These knights are following Lancia. Izel realizes that they don't want any mercenaries following them. So she just smiles and says that they can go together. A little while later, the blonde, now in complete shock, turns to her friend. She looks around, and she starts to get a little scared. The people who are in this place also look at them and wonder what these children are doing here. The main character approaches one of the men and asks if his name is Rebecca. The man replies that Rebecca is actually his wife, and then curiously asks if the girl knows her. He even jokingly suggests that she might be the child that the woman was supposedly hiding from him. Izel calmly replies that no, unfortunately, she has no such secret. The man breathes a sigh of relief and says he is glad to hear it. He then shakes the girl's hand, and the main character continues the conversation. She says she has heard that her uncle is considered the most famous moonshiner in the entire capital. She immediately asks if this is true. The man is surprised and asks who told her this. The girl calmly replies that it was written in huge letters right on the door. After that, he asks why she needs this information and whether she also needs moonshine. He adds that the young lady looks like a real noblewoman, so he doubts she would need such cheap booze. However, Izel replies that the opposite is true. It seems that her uncle may need it one day. The man is a little surprised by these words. The people in the hall are also shocked. Some grab food from the table and start throwing it at the man, shouting loudly that he is trash. Some of them say they always knew about his love for women, but that's clearly going too far. They even claim that they warned him that one day it would end this way. The young lady understands that this reaction is to be expected. Judging by the fact that these men have been drinking moonshine since morning, it would have been difficult to expect anything else. Meanwhile, the man himself indignantly asks what these lunatics are doing. Then he demands that they stop. At that moment, another person enters the room and asks what is going on. The man immediately realizes that it is Rebecca and happily says that she has arrived just in time. He quickly explains that he doesn't understand what's going on. These two girls came and said that he needed them. Rebecca asks in surprise what he's talking about. The man replies that he himself cannot understand the situation. Meanwhile, the brunette approaches the girls. She looks at them closely and asks who they are. At that moment, the main character turns to her and asks if she is Rebecca's sister. The woman is slightly surprised and asks again if she was just called a sister. She is a little embarrassed, but then leans toward the girls and confirms that yes, her name is Sister Rebecca. She then asks who is standing in front of her. The young lady replies that her name is Izel and that she has come to help her sister. Isel also says that sooner or later they will need to produce a lot of moonshine. Then she adds that when the time comes, the woman should contact her. After saying this, she hands her a business card. Rebecca looks at the card in surprise and asks if that's all. The young lady calmly replies that it is. The brunette sighs and says that, unfortunately, she won't need the girl's help because she already has a supplier. Isel replies that he knows this, but he still advises them to stay in touch because it may be useful in the future. After that, she turns around and says it's time for them to go. Then she calls Lancia to follow her. Rebecca remains standing in place and looks at the business card in her hands. It has the name of the cooperative farm written on it. On the same day, the main character comes to see her teacher. However, Velen is just sitting calmly and drinking tea. The girl notices that about 5 minutes have passed. She knew that Velen was looking for her, but she still doesn't understand why. Isel begins to wonder what he wanted to talk about and whether this meeting is related to the previous test. She also wonders whether she should start the conversation first or wait a little longer. Finally, the man turns to her and says he will start himself. After that, he unexpectedly asks who she really is. The young lady is surprised by this question. The teacher explains that at first, he simply thought she was an unusual child. He thought she was just smarter than the others. But after the last exam, his opinion changed. He asks if the girl is something special. At this moment, the main character even wonders if he thinks she is some kind of strange creature. Velen asks her to answer honestly. The young lady nervously clutches the fabric of her dress in her hands. She realizes that the man seems to have noticed something. At that moment, the teacher hands her the test. Then he asks why she answered all the questions correctly, but wrote down the wrong answers. He explains that if this had happened once or twice, it could have been considered a coincidence. But now it is clear that it was done intentionally. The young lady realizes that he is talking about the exam and wonders if he even checked the answer sheet. This seems surprising to her. Teachers usually don't have enough time even for research, let alone checking one student's work separately. Meanwhile, the man asks again why she did that, since she could have easily solved all the problems correctly. The girl realizes that the reason is actually quite simple. She must not draw unnecessary attention to herself. Children are usually unable to answer such difficult questions, and they are certainly not expected to already know how to earn money or be useful. In addition, many students said that the test was very difficult. Therefore, she did not want to stand out and deliberately lowered her score. However, she now understands that the problem arose because her answer sheet differed from the sheet with the answers. It seems that this is what caused the questions, so she says she was just trying to be careful. The man asks again if she really means caution. The young lady explains that many nobles look down on those who have fallen into ruin and lost their former power. There are people like Raven who don't show it openly, but others behave in a way that constantly reminds her of the past. Therefore, the girl decided to act more cautiously and not attract unnecessary attention. Hearing this, the man is visibly surprised. He asks if she really wrote the wrong answers on purpose. The young lady calmly says yes. Velen asks if someone told her to do it. She says no. Then he asks, surprised, if she really thought of it herself. The young lady confirms this. The teacher looks at her with a slight smile and says that she is indeed special. After that, the man sighs heavily. The young lady notices this and calmly asks if there is a problem. She also apologizes in case he didn't like her behavior. The teacher replies that this is not the case at all. He says that if any other student had been in her place, he would have decided that they simply didn't care. But in her case, he was sure there was a reason behind it. The young lady is surprised by this answer and thinks that this man seems to have a really good opinion of her. After all, apart from their first meeting, when she came to him for a book, they had hardly spoken. The girl realizes that this conversation has reminded her why she became the great sorceress in the first place and fled to the sea from Velen Baskley. The rebel army was a place created by people who had become disillusioned with the empire, an empire where commoners were oppressed more than anywhere else, and it was there that the emperor's illegitimate son was made ruler. And the main man in this place was Velen. At that moment, the man turns to Isel. He tells her that she doesn't need to force herself to go to class and pretend that everything is fine, and if she doesn't mind, he is ready to teach her personally. So he asks her directly if she wants to become his student. Hearing this, the young lady thinks about it. She can't help but wonder if this means he wants to make her part of the rebels, but she only replies aloud that she will think about it. After a while, the blonde stands with a smile on her face and tells Isel that she has come. But when the main character opens the door, the girl is a little surprised. She notices dark circles under Isel's eyes. Lancia immediately asks what happened to her. The main character replies that everything is fine and that she just has too much to do. The blonde lady says that today marks the start of the festival season, so she suggests that Isel go there with her. What's more, she has even prepared clothes for her in advance. At that moment, the blonde realizes that she has never been to a festival with a friend before. What's more, this festival lasts twice as long as usual. People flock from different countries, and the streets are literally packed. Therefore, together with Easel, they will be able to walk, have fun, and laugh a lot every day. However, the main character apologizes and says that it will be too difficult for her. The blonde asks in surprise why. In response, Easel opens the door to her room and says that the reason is right in front of her. Looking inside, the girl sees a huge pile of papers. She asks in surprise what it all is. She also wonders why there is a desk right by the door. The young lady calmly explains that these are contracts. She understands that due to the huge flow of potential buyers, the desk had to be moved right to the entrance of the mansion to accept applications there. The girl sighs heavily and says that this is the situation, although deep down she understands that everything turned out to be much bigger than she expected. Fortunately, thanks to plans made in advance, they managed to prepare the Panatkan mill and malt house, so work began without a hitch. But then she was literally inundated with orders. Now the girl explains that the festival has completely run out of ingredients for making beer and bread. That's why there were so many orders for groceries. At this point, the blonde is trying to understand what her friend is talking about. Meanwhile, another man arrives at the estate and asks if he has come to the right place. He also asks if the Spencer family really lives here. The girl confirms this and immediately asks if he is a buyer. She then takes one of the sheets. The man replies that yes, he is a buyer and has heard that this is the only place in the capital where you can buy the necessary goods and food. The young lady hands him a piece of paper and asks him to write down what exactly he wants to buy and in what quantity. He needs to write his name and address at the bottom. Then she explains that the initial payment is half the cost of the order and asks if he is okay with that. The man is surprised and asks again if he really has to pay half the amount right away. The girl calmly replies that this is indeed the case. She assures him that everything will be sent as promised. Judging by his list, the goods will arrive in about 4 days, and she asks if this is acceptable to him. The man replies that, overall, he doesn't care. However, he still asks if the price is too high. He realizes that the cost is almost twice as high as the usual retail price. And even if she has run out of stock, the price still seems too high. The main character calmly explains that at the festival, he sells beer and bread at 3 times the price. At the same time, he spends the same amount on food as before. After that, the young lady asks if it's not like stealing. In addition, the price of grain has risen due to a sudden crop failure. Therefore, unfortunately, it is almost impossible to change the price now. Then the girl says that if he doesn't like something, he can just leave. The man is visibly nervous, but still agrees to the deal. After signing the contract, the man bows and says goodbye. The blonde has been watching the whole time. Finally, she says that it seemed a little rude. The main character replies that there is no other way. She communicates with dozens of people every day. Sometimes she feels like her eyes are about to fall out from exhaustion. Fortunately, her parents help her so she can focus on paperwork and not be distracted by other problems. But even so, the young lady realizes that it's very tiring. She apologizes again and says that she'll be busy, so she's unlikely to be able to go to the festival. Besides, her mom and dad are helping out in the fields right now, and she can't leave them all alone, even for fun. The blonde thinks for a moment. Then, looking at the papers, she asks if her friend will still be able to have some fun. If they can finish all this work. The young lady replies that then, perhaps yes, but she admits that it won't be easy. The blonde immediately turns to Freddie. When the knight approaches her, she looks at him and orders someone to call the people. The guy briefly replies that he understands everything. At this moment, the main character wonders what exactly he has understood. The blonde looks at the young lady and confidently says that she will help her. Meanwhile, the young lady's father puts one of the heavy bags on the ground and sighs wearily. He realizes that he has been working non-stop since morning, but there is still no end in sight. He recalls that even when the warehouse was closed, they already lacked workers. And now there are catastrophically few people, and the man feels that he is more likely to lose consciousness from exhaustion than to see the end of this work. He feels that he will simply disappear from exhaustion before all this work is finished. But still, the man understands that now is not the time to rest. After all, this is all for his beloved daughter. What's more, her venture is really flourishing now, and he understands perfectly well that the girl should not miss such an opportunity. Therefore, the young lady's father decides that he must carry at least one more bag, even if it means literally breaking his bones. At that moment, someone approaches him from behind, apologizes, and cautiously asks, "Are you Viscount Spencer?" The man replies that yes, it is indeed him. After that, he thinks that maybe someone has come again to rush him with deliveries. However, the guy with purple hair says something completely different. He politely introduces himself as Baron Barrington and says he has come at the request of Miss Ermond. The young lady's father is surprised and asks if he is referring to the family of Earl Ermond. The guy confirms that it is indeed them. The blonde man involuntarily thinks that it is happening again. After all, it was not only commoners and merchants who needed supplies. Even the nobles, who received guests from afar, faced a shortage of supplies. Therefore, from time to time, they also turned to them for grain and flour. The man recalls that 2 such individuals have already visited him today. Therefore, he states that if the Baron wishes to purchase something, he should contact his daughter at the mansion. However, the man replies that he was sent there. The young lady's father is surprised and asks what he means. He puts the bag of grain on the ground and takes the paper. Beginning to read what is written, the man looks closely at the lines. Suddenly, he realizes that the letter was written by Isel. The guy with purple hair asks if he is sure. When the young lady's father confirms this, the Baron snaps his fingers, and at that very moment, workers appear. They immediately begin to carry away the sacks of grain. The young lady's father watches everything that is happening in complete shock. The Baron smiles and says that now they should leave this work to them. Meanwhile, the main character reflects. She cannot believe that everything could be resolved so easily. Thanks to Lancia, she finally managed to tear herself away from the table where she had been sitting for several days. The girl recruited people from noble families who were reliable and competent. Thanks to their help, the problems quickly began to be solved because they went to help her parents. Lancia's help completely dispelled fears that they were desperately short of manpower. At this point, the blonde turns to her friend and says that she bought a treat at a place where there was a huge line. Everyone around said that the food there was incredibly delicious. The main character asks if she really bought it there, and the blonde confirms, asking if Isel knows the place. Isel replies that she does. After all, she was the one who supplied the food there, and the girl realizes that the festival is in full swing. The blonde says that her father talked about a banquet at the Imperial Palace that has been going on for 3 days. It seems that he goes there every day, which is why he is so busy. Isel asks why she didn't go there herself. The blonde calmly replies that she wanted to spend time with her. The main character looks at her and thinks that she is an amazing person. She didn't do anything special for her, but this girl still stays by her side. And at that moment, the young lady realizes that this is what true friendship looks like. Meanwhile, Lancia turns to Isel. She asks how her assignment is going. The young lady replies that everything is going quite well, and that the results are already visible in the number of contracts. According to her calculations, the investment has already paid off. And if she manages to sell everything, the profit could be about 4 times the initial amount. In addition, they will be able to earn even more if they sell grain from the southern grain stores of the province. Isel also says that after the festival, it looks like she will be able to return to her studies. At that moment, the blonde asks her to wait a moment and takes her hand. She gently wipes the cream off her finger with a handkerchief and says that she has gotten dirty. The main character is slightly surprised and replies that everything is fine, although deep down she thinks that such sudden movements have frightened her a little. She also wonders where the timid and shy girl has gone. Meanwhile, Lancia smiles and says that everything is ready. Isel thinks that this girl is completely unpredictable after all. The blonde suggests taking a little more time to look around the festival. The young lady agrees. But at that moment, someone bumps into her, and she involuntarily flinches. The blonde immediately asks if everything is okay. The guy who bumped into her is just annoyed and angry. He says he's all wet now. After that, the guy looks at the young lady and asks why she's just standing there, and whether she is going to apologize. At that moment, Isel thinks about how he can be angry at a person whom he himself pushed. The guy demands an apology again, but the main character calmly asks why she should do that. The young man is surprised by her words and says that she seems to be too immature to behave normally, or perhaps she grew up among peasants who had never even heard of etiquette. Isel realizes that, judging by her clothes, he has mistaken her for a commoner. The girl even thinks that perhaps she should have worn the outfit that Lancia had prepared for her. The guy continues to say that in such cases, a commoner should bow her head and apologize. He adds that where he comes from, nothing will happen to him, even if he puts a commoner to sleep forever. Lancia immediately declares that Isel is also a noblewoman. The knights nearby think that perhaps it is time to intervene, but the girl says that she will deal with it herself. The young man smirks and declares that if a noblewoman behaves like this, then she is simply a fallen aristocrat. The blonde immediately replies that this is not true, because she and Isel come from very respectable families. The young man irritably turns to one of his servants and orders him to deal with it according to their rules. The servant approaches the young lady and extends his hand. He tells her not to blame him for what is about to happen. The main character looks at him coldly. At that moment, the knight Lancia suddenly jumps up. But before he can do anything, other knights appear. Leading them is a young man with silver hair. The man who wanted to harm her is instantly surrounded by swords on all sides. The brunette asks in surprise what is going on. But at that moment, Karl approaches him. The servant tries to do something. However, one of the knights calmly tells him that it is better not to move, because if he moves, his limbs could be cut into 10 neat pieces. The brunette suddenly receives a blow to the face. Karl asks if he really ordered his servant to deal with this according to their rules. After that, he grabs the young man by the collar and says that he will try to do the same. At this time, His Highness wonders where this child has disappeared to again. He doesn't understand how he can disappear in the blink of an eye, but he knows that the boy is incredibly fast, so he tries to guess where he might have gone. At that moment, someone approaches him and gently strokes his head. It turns out to be the prince's older brother. The first prince, Gladius Becker, asks why the young man is standing alone and where Karl is now. The fifth prince replies that the boy has disappeared somewhere. His brother tells him not to worry because the black lions are nearby, so everything will be fine. The blonde replies that he is not worried about Karl at all. In fact, he is concerned about the safety of the people around him. He recalls that the recent incident with Raven Baskel had serious consequences. Archduke Byron even personally appealed to the emperor. He demanded permission to deal with Baskerville himself, who had threatened his son. Fortunately, the situation was diffused. But after that, Byron's policy changed, and now the Black Lions are required to stay close to Karl throughout the festival. The prince adds that Karl reacts very sharply, even to minor things. His brother knows this very well. Gladio just smiles, because how could anyone not know this? Once, an ambitious young aristocrat wanted to give Charles a gift and reached into his pocket. But the Black Lions immediately grabbed him, suspecting an assassination attempt, and if anyone tries to harm Charles, or even just makes a mistake, it could end very badly. And now, thinking about it, the younger prince wonders if Karl will put someone into an eternal sleep. In his thoughts, he asks him not to get into trouble. Meanwhile, the brunette with red liquid on his nose asks in shock what this guy is doing and whether he has decided to fall into an eternal sleep himself. Karl calmly replies that he does not. The brunette wonders how this guy dared to hit him, a man who came from another country to see the sights. He demands to be released immediately and asks if Karl knows who he is. He then declares that he is Pietro, the third prince of the royal family of Piotta. However, Karl calmly says that he is not from this kingdom. The young man is surprised. Karl adds that he has never seen such a prince before. After all, he was born into the family of Archduke Byron and often attended important state events. He has attended large banquets and knows many members of royal families, but he has never heard of Pietro. Then he says he understands. Apparently, this guy just has clothes, like a prince. The main character can't hold back her laughter. Pietro is very embarrassed and orders that the young man be put to sleep forever immediately. Karl replies that he is truly sorry, but he still does not remember him. The brunette begins to think that they are simply mocking him. At that moment, the prince's other servants approach. Seeing them, Pietro says that it's all over for this guy. He cannot even ask for forgiveness because he will not receive it. The servants ask what happened to the prince. He declares that these people have desecrated Piotta and attacked a member of the royal family. Therefore, they must be put to sleep forever immediately. The servants exchange glances and think that their prince has brought trouble upon himself again, but they cannot ignore an attack on a member of the royal family. They demand that the attackers lower their swords and identify themselves, otherwise things will end badly. But the prince again shouts for everyone to be put to sleep immediately. One of the servants says that first they need to find out who they are dealing with. The prince impatiently orders them to do it quickly. Then the servant demands that they reveal their identities. This is the last warning, and if they do not lower their swords. One of the knights calmly says the name Byron. Hearing this, the servant asks in shock if they are really from the Byron family. Then he looks at Karl, and he notices the Black Lions with horror. He looks at another servant surrounded by swords. He doesn't understand why Byron's Black Lions attacked Pietro. After all, they are known throughout the continent for their strength and cruelty. He still doesn't understand what happened, so he suggests that everyone step back a little and calmly sort things out, because it seems that there has been a misunderstanding. But the prince indignantly asks what misunderstanding there could be, and again orders them to be put to sleep forever immediately. The servant quietly reminds him that these are the Byrons. He asks if he really wants to ruin relations with this family. However, the brunette shouts that it doesn't matter. After all, they attacked a member of the royal family. Therefore, they must be put to sleep immediately. The servants are confused as to whom they should put to sleep. The prince continues to shout and demand retribution. The servant realizes that attacking the Black Lions is too dangerous. Suddenly, someone loudly orders them to stop. The Black Lions immediately take their swords away from the servant. One of the prince's men looks at the blonde man in surprise and realizes that they are standing before the first prince of the empire. He calmly says that there is no need for such cruelty at the festival and asks for the men to be removed. The Prince of Piotta looks at his servants in shock and asks what they are doing. After all, he clearly ordered them to put everyone into an eternal sleep. But at that moment, an unfamiliar voice addresses him. He is coldly told that if he does not want to lose his head for attempting to assassinate the imperial family in a foreign country, it would be better for him to just keep his mouth shut now. The guy looks at the blonde man and thinks confusedly, did he really just say something about the imperial family? At this moment, the first prince calmly addresses Karl. After his words, Karl releases Prince Piotta. He approaches the blonde man, who gently strokes his head. Meanwhile, the other prince's servants begin to retreat cautiously. When the blonde man looks in their direction, they immediately rush away, taking their prince with them. The main character and her friend watch all this in complete shock. And at that moment, their eyes meet the prince's. He suggests that they don't stand there and take a little walk. The young lady realizes that she is standing before the first prince, the very same Gladio Becker, the future emperor, and at the same time, the last emperor of this empire, a man who will later be sent to the guillotine for failing to protect the state. Meanwhile, another prince approaches Karl and taps him lightly on the shoulder. He grumbles and asks him to stop doing that. After all, Karl constantly disappears somewhere. The main character realizes that this boy is the fifth prince, Ishmael. Since childhood, he had been Karl's only peer and friend. Therefore, wherever the Byron family appeared, Ishmael always looked after him. And it seems that this time, it's the same. The blonde tells his friend that after his last escapade, a huge number of people are watching Charles. He reminds him that they are literally one step away from being banned from attending the festival. And it is only thanks to his older brother that they were given another chance. But he still asks why Karl continues to behave the same way. The young man just remains silent, confused. He looks at the young lady, the prince also looks at her, and immediately understands everything. Meanwhile, Karl says that he was just happy to see a familiar face among people he doesn't know at all. The blonde man comes closer and quietly remarks that this is clearly not just about the joy of meeting her. He adds that even after returning to the Archduke's residence, Karl continued to ask about that very girl, what she does, where she lives, and what kind of family she comes from. Karl asks in surprise how he knows all this. The prince replies that Karl has been so openly interested that rumors have long since spread throughout the Archduchy, and everyone is talking about how the naive young gentleman has fallen in love for the first time. The young man immediately blushes and says that this is not the case at all. The blonde man just smiles and says, "All right, so be it." Then he approaches the young lady. He greets her, saying he is glad to see her. Isel notices that she is a 10-year-old child with light baby fuzz on her cheeks. But he greets her with such elegance and politeness that many adults could learn from him. The girl replies that she is also glad to see Prince Ishmael. She adds that it seems they meet quite often. After all, it is extremely difficult to meet someone from the imperial family, and she has already had this honor twice. Therefore, the word often is quite appropriate here. The young man is silent for a moment, then says that he always feels as if Miss Isel thinks like an adult. The girl asks in surprise if that's really how it seems. The prince replies that her manner of speech and the atmosphere of the conversation create the feeling of talking to an adult, even though she is only 8 years old. Isel realizes that, apart from her parents, she has always felt uncomfortable acting like a child in front of other people. That's why she stopped doing it a long time ago. Besides, she has no idea how to pretend to be little. Even in front of strangers, it would look too strange. The blonde next to her adds that this is true. She says that Isel really thinks like an adult, and how wonderful it is to be so smart and quick-witted, to receive attention from a young gentleman and do amazing things without hesitation. The main character thanks her for her kind words. Then she turns to the prince and says that he also behaves very maturely. The young man proudly replies that it is because he has already grown up. The young lady thinks that it is not for nothing that they say children do not like it when they are talked to like children. But suddenly, she remembers something and turns to the young gentleman Karl. The girl thanks him. The young man replies shyly that there is no need to thank him. After all, he just did what he had to do. But Isel says she still can't ignore the fact that he stood up for her. If he hadn't intervened, the situation could have ended badly. Although the girl understands that there was no real danger, Lancia is always followed by about 10 knights who are responsible for her safety. Therefore, it is unlikely that anything really serious could have happened. Karl just looks down, embarrassed. The main character can't help but wonder, is this shy boy really the main character of the novel? It's hard to believe that one day he will grow up to be a cold and dispassionate man, from whom a chill will literally emanate. At this point, the first prince turns to Isel and Karl and tells them it's time to go back. He also tells Miss Isel and Miss Lancia that he is glad to see them safe and sound. The blonde asks in surprise if the prince knows her. He replies that it is impossible not to know the only daughter of Count Rogan. He admits that he was worried about whether the young ladies had been hurt. But now, seeing that everything is fine, he can breathe a sigh of relief. The main character says that it is all thanks to the young Mr. Byron. Karl is embarrassed again and says he didn't do anything special. But at that moment, the first prince says that the ability to accept someone's gratitude is also a great virtue. After that, Karl quietly says that he is glad to see Isel safe and sound. The girl smiles and replies that it is thanks to him. She bows slightly, and the young man does the same. After that, he smiles. The prince says that now it is time for them to say goodbye. After all, the time when they were supposed to return has long passed. Karl says goodbye to Isel and tells her that it is time for him to go. The main character responds in kind and says that they will see each other later. Hearing this, the young man is slightly embarrassed. He says that in fact he will not be able to go anywhere for a long time. Descendants of the direct line of Byron are required to serve on the border for about 10 years. Aisel asks in surprise if this is true. She understands that this is a kind of national defense duty. The young man says that this means they will probably not be able to see each other in the future, and he would like to ask her something. The girl asks what exactly. Very embarrassed, the guy asks her to marry him later. Everyone around is surprised. The young lady asks if he is talking about marriage. She thinks he is suddenly proposing to her. The young man explains that his father always said one thing: if there is a person who saved your life, spending the rest of your days with them is a great happiness. Besides, he has never met such an amazing girl in his entire life. Ethel thinks it sounds too loud. After all, saying something like that when you're only 10 years old is a little strange. The young man says that there used to be a misunderstanding between them. But now everything is different. When he was at the residence, he thought about her constantly. And even now, she is still on his mind. So when he returns, he asks her to be his wife. The girl thinks about how to react to this. But then she realizes that he is still a 10-year-old child. At that age, it's normal to run after your mother and say that you will only marry her. So later he will probably just forget this conversation. The young lady calmly replies that it's okay, she will marry him. The young man asks in amazement if this is true. She replies that only if he still remembers this conversation in 10 years. The guy confidently says that she has nothing to worry about. He will never forget. Isel understands that 10 years is a very long time, and she doubts whether he will really remember it, especially when the real heroine of the story appears in his life. Then he won't even glance in her direction. But the girl still thinks that becoming the main character's unrequited childhood love isn't so bad. The young man shows them the silver crosses, remelted from his first sword, and offers each of them one. Then he hands a cross to the young lady. But when the young man looks at the cross in his hand, he freezes in shock. Clutching it tighter, he can't help but wonder if this girl is really the one he is thinking about right now. When the main character returns to the estate, one of the servants greets her with words about how well she worked today. Ethel immediately asks if there has been any news about the teacher's arrival. The servant replies that there has been no news. Then the young lady calmly says that as soon as there is any news, he must report it to her immediately. The guy respectfully replies that he understands everything. Then he adds that the hot bath is already ready and asks if the lady would like to take it right now. After thinking for a moment, the girl replies that it would be nice. The servant says that he will give the necessary instructions. A short time later, the main character is already lying relaxed in the hot bath. She quietly reflects on the fact that 15 years have already passed, and it seems that her long journey is gradually coming to an end. The girl realizes that this time has been more than enough. That shy and timid boy has turned into a man whose heart is now filled with coldness. These years have also completely changed Ezel's situation. 15 years ago, thanks to Vahidman's assignment, her business began to grow rapidly, and the numerous flour mills and malt houses that had previously operated haphazardly were united into one large guild. The management of this guild eventually ended up in the hands of the Spencer family. The money they began to earn allowed them to buy even more grain. Thanks to this, their market share began to grow rapidly. In the end, Wahidman personally supported Azel after seeing how well she had handled her task. Using the information she had obtained and Wahidman's influence behind her, Azel was able to earn a huge fortune. And now she is directing all that money toward one goal: trying to prevent the end of the world. The young lady realizes that her dream used to be much simpler. She just wanted to get rich and live peacefully with her family. But reality took a completely different turn, and the girl admits that in fact, she never intended to go that far. Besides, Azel understands perfectly well that from the very beginning, the idea of saving the world did not belong to her at all. The author of the entire plan was Vahidman. He was the one who conceived the project, and Azel was supposed to be one of the key figures in it. But over time, everything changed. Now she has taken the leading position and is in charge of all the work. At that moment, the girl hears a knock on her office door. She calmly allows them to enter. A servant enters the room and informs the countess that the table is already set. He says that the lady can begin her meal. Azel replies that she will be down shortly, and then asks the servant to call Vesemir. The girl explains that on her way home, she met people who were loudly spreading rumors about the imminent end of the world, and she believes that something needs to be done about it. As in the original story, Vesemir, who controlled the Nine-Tailed Guild, controlled the spread of information in the capital on Azel's orders. His task was to spread as much calm and optimistic news as possible. After that, the main character turns to the servant again and asks how her mother is feeling now. The guy looks away for a moment. That's enough for the girl to understand that her mother's health is gradually deteriorating. 2 years ago, the woman became completely bedridden. Her condition deteriorated sharply due to the severe cold. Despite good medicine and constant care from the doctor, her health never recovered. Azel understands that this is precisely why she cannot simply leave everything behind, even though she has a huge fortune. Now the main character asks her servant to take good care of her mother. Her father is always by her side, but it is too difficult for him to cope with everything on his own. The servant agrees, but then remembers another piece of news. Mr. Mount came to the estate in the morning and invited the young lady to lunch tomorrow. After that, he asks if she will go. Isel replies that if the invitation comes from Lancia, she will definitely go. The servant nods and says that he will then make all the necessary preparations. When he leaves, the young lady sighs quietly. Looking at her hands, she realizes that her goal is very close. The girl thinks about how much she wants to escape this endless and annoying routine. She dreams of going to a quiet place where her mother can regain her strength and she herself can finally get some real rest. After a while, the servant returns to the room and announces that a guest has arrived for the lady. The girl is surprised and says that she is not expecting anyone today. After all, everyone knows that she does not usually receive visitors without a prior appointment. But if the servant reports this, it means that this is a person who cannot be ignored. Therefore, the girl orders the guest to be shown into the reception room. When the main character goes down there, she is slightly surprised to see a visitor. The girl recognizes him and realizes with surprise that it is His Highness Archduke Byron standing before her. The thought immediately occurs to her that perhaps some problem has arisen. She politely asks what has prompted his unexpected visit and whether there is anything left unsaid between them after their last meeting. A thought even flashes through Isel's mind that he might have come to terminate the contract. At this moment, the young man formally addresses her as Countess Isel Latanya Spencer, but the main character calmly says that there is no need to use her full name and titles. Then the young man simply calls her by her name. And the girl involuntarily notes that now it sounds too short. The guy says a little awkwardly that it might sound like an excuse, but it's better to explain now than to continue to accumulate misunderstandings. Isel calmly asks what exactly he is talking about. The young man comes closer and gently takes her hand. He tells her that 5 years ago, he had a serious accident. After that, he fell into a coma for a while and lost some of his memories due to the severe shock. Then the young man places the cross in the young lady's hand and says that memories of her and this cross also seem to have disappeared. The main character looks at the object in her palm, then looks up at the young man. He explains that he has the same cross. He used to carry it with him until he lost his memory, so he decided that this thing must be very important and tried with all his might to recover the memories associated with it. But it was like trying to see something at the bottom of the deep sea. No matter how hard he tried to remember, there was only emptiness in his head. But now, everything has changed. The young lady smiles gently and says she is glad to hear that. These words make the young man visibly embarrassed. He admits that he has wanted to meet her for a long time. He sincerely apologizes for not being able to remember her. The girl calmly replies that there was an accident, so she understands everything. The guy smiles with relief. However, noticing a slight awkwardness on his face, the young lady realizes that his memories have only partially returned. She sighs quietly and thinks that she had expected this outcome from the very beginning. Therefore, his confession did not hurt her as much as it could have. Meanwhile, the young man says seriously that even if she is understanding about it, there is still no excuse for him. After all, he once made a very important promise and then completely forgot about it. The main character asks what promise he is talking about. At that moment, she remembers the words he once said, promising to marry her one day. The girl asks him to wait a moment and involuntarily wonders if what he said back then was not just empty words. Meanwhile, the young man says he understands how shameless it looks. He knows she could be angry because he made her wait so long, forgetting his promise. But the guy assures her that both then and now he meant it completely seriously. For him, it was never empty words or childish chatter. The main character turns to his lordship in surprise, thanks him for his words, and says that it is a great honor for her to hear this. She is sincerely grateful that he still remembers the promise he made so long ago, even though it was not easy to bring back those memories. However, she then calmly adds that she is now Countess Spencer, not Miss Spencer. This means that the Countess already has a man to whom she is betrothed. Hearing this, the young man is shocked, and the young lady recalls the old laws of the empire. Once upon a time, women could not inherit titles at all. These outdated rules existed for hundreds of years, and for more than 200 years, blocked the path of noble women to politics from the very foundation of the empire. Everything began to change thanks to Empress Louise. She was the first to fight for women's rights and managed to convince the emperor and parliament. As a result, a law was passed allowing noble women to inherit family titles. However, there were conditions. A woman had to be either married or have a fiancé. Of course, this was still not complete equality with men who could inherit titles without marriage. But it was still a huge step forward compared to the time when such a thing was completely impossible for women. The young man asks, confused, if this means she really has a fiancé. The main character just sighs quietly. She thought his old promise was just a joke, and now she wonders if he really means that he remembers it. After all, that promise was made when they were only 10 years old. For her, it had long since become just a distant childhood memory. Since then, their paths had never crossed, so she naturally assumed that he had long forgotten everything. Now the young lady cautiously asks if he is all right. The boy replies that he is fine. although in reality, everything looks quite the opposite. The young man sighs heavily. Then he raises his head and says that, although it's very late, he still wants to congratulate her on her engagement. The main character thanks him for his congratulations. After that, the guy asks when exactly she got engaged. The girl replies that it happened 2 years ago. Then the young man asks who her chosen one is. For a moment, Easel feels that for some reason she does not want to answer this question. But she still says that her fiancé is the second son of Earl Burton Barrington, Louis Barrington. Carl quietly remarks that this guy is really unusually lucky. When the young lady asks what he means, he just replies that he means nothing. Then he says that if the engagement took place 2 years ago, the wedding must be coming up very soon. The young lady replies that she is not sure about that and that it is too early to talk about the wedding. The guy asks in surprise why. The girl explains that, as he himself knows, she has too much to do right now. Deep down, she understands perfectly well that she initially agreed to her engagement to Louis solely to gain the right to inherit the title. The Earl of Barrington, an old friend of her father's, had 2 sons. The elder chose the path of a knight, while the younger Louis had been quiet and withdrawn since childhood. The Earl of Barrington himself was a brave and decisive man. He constantly tried to make his son stronger and bolder, but he was never able to change his character. And it was this quiet boy that Easel drew into her plans. He was silent, calm, and almost always kept to himself. Louis was the same age as Ethel, but most importantly, he had a sharp mind, and the girl noticed this immediately. So she appointed Louis as her secretary, kept him close by, and often treated him quite harshly. So it's no surprise that such a guy agreed to a fake engagement. Eisel told him straight up that she would set him free as soon as the whole thing was over. Sometimes he looked like a poor prince, captured by an evil witch named Eisel. Although he was not a house elf at all, Louis asked to be released almost every day, and the girl is firmly convinced that even if the sky splits in 2, she will never marry him. She explains to Carl that there are too many circumstances preventing them from getting married in the near future. Carl says he's glad to hear that, but immediately adds that he didn't say anything like that. After that, he just calmly says that he hopes to hear good news someday. He also promises to continue working to ensure that the contract signed today is presented to Parliament in the best possible light and receives approval. He adds that he is sincerely grateful to Countess Spencer for her dedication to the cause. The young lady replies that there is no need for thanks and says she will walk him to the door. She also thanks him for the opportunity to meet and says she is grateful for that he accepted her proposal. The girl hopes that their efforts will bring good results in the future. The guy says he hopes to see her as often as possible. At this moment, the young lady thinks that such frequent meetings are not necessary at all. With this thought in mind, she opens the door. But behind the door, she unexpectedly sees Louis. The guy turns to Eisel and asks in surprise why she is standing right at the entrance. The girl is also surprised and asks what happened. Isn't today his day off? At that moment, Carl coldly utters Louis's name. The main character is a little surprised and turns around. She notices Carl staring intently at her fiancé. Louis begins to get noticeably nervous. When their eyes meet, Louis looks as if he is about to faint. Ethel stands between them, not understanding what is happening. Carl calmly says he is pleased to meet her and introduces himself as Carl Berg Byron. Louis replies that his name is Louis Barrington. They then shake hands. Louis begins to talk about the Byron family, but the Archduke just smiles at this moment. However, his gaze becomes so cold and fierce that the young man becomes frightened. Louis tries to pull his hand away, but the Archduke holds it tightly.